So the test run. All right, it says we're live. It says we're live. You want to test it just to see? Here, I'm going to pull up Facebook just to make sure that we're actually live. This is our first time doing it from this platform, so I just want to double check it.
No, I received on the phone. I see it. We're live. It says we're live on the phone. So I mean, I can check here, but
all right. I'm
yeah,
gonna check on YouTube. I'm gonna check on YouTube too, just make sure.
We're in.
All right. Just want to see my actual YouTube. I just want to double check it. First time doing it. Don't want to. I saw on Facebook that we're there. Just want to see my actual YouTube. All right. Cool.
I see it. Yeah, we're here on the page. All right. Let me see.
I'm gonna do the intro.
Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hello, my name is Steve Ushler, and this is the Locked In Podcast, a podcast that was crafted by the minds of myself and my co-host, George Mentai, in September of 2020. In this week's episode of the Locked In Podcast, we will feature a true crime documentary where we delve into the mindsets of two of the most prolific serial killers in history. We will reveal some of their most heinous crimes and what ultimately caused them to snap. Their names are Andre Chikatilo and Robert Hansen. This episode will appeal specifically to anyone who is interested in true crime or the lives of serial killers. Featuring, as always, Steve Ushler and George Mentai. Enjoy the show.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Locked In Podcast, your home for personal development, sports, and more. Your host for the evening, Steve Ushler, and alongside me, as always, is my co-host, George Mentai.
What's up, bro? GMAC 88 right here in the building. What's up, guys? Good to see you guys on a Thursday afternoon, Thursday evening. And here we are.
So this is the first time we're experimenting with this platform. We're using a new platform instead of Zoom. We're using a platform called StreamYard. First time using it here. So I didn't even use a mic for this one because I think I was getting a little bit of feedback on my end. So just going to go without the mic today. But also got some info on the right side here because obviously this is a very facts-oriented episode with a true crime episode of the podcast. First time doing this one. Excited to get into it. We're going to be touching on, as you saw in the intro, two prolific serial killers. One of them is the Butcher of Rostov, and his murders mainly took place. His murders mainly took place in Russia. He killed a lot of women and children, and George is going to touch on him. His name is Andre Chikatilo. I'm going to touch on the other murderer. He's known as the Baker Butcher of Alaska, and his crimes mainly occurred in Anchorage and around the Anchorage, Alaska area. He's known, but not as well known as Andre Chikatilo, but his name is Robert Hansen, and some of his crimes were very, very brutal. and it was a lot of rape and murder involved. And we're definitely going to touch on both these guys. They're pretty sadistic, and that's why you also saw the viewer discretion thing at the beginning there, because we're obviously going to be getting into some pretty fuck shit here. So I'm pretty interested to get into it. As you can see, we got some props. If you look up above me, we got Live Locked In Podcast, and then if you actually look on George's side, you can also see that there's a little icon above him. But I'm excited to get into this true crime. If you're into true crime or serial killers, you're going to love this one today. I'm just ready to hop into it, man. Episode 33, we're 1/3 of the way to 100. Let's get into it, man. We're gonna hop right into it here. So before we hop into it, 3 things you guys got to do. Number 1, if you like our podcast, spread the word about our podcast. If you're watching us on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that notification bell to turn notifications on, because we produce content every Thursday or Friday, depending on the week, and you won't want to miss it. Number 2, if you see something you like or want to chime in, whether it's on our YouTube live or a Facebook live stream, comment down below. We'll try to get back to you during the live stream. If we don't get to you during the live stream, we will get back to you after the episode is over. And number 3, just sit back, enjoy the episode. It's 2021, guys. Be true and be you. So we're going to hop into it here. Basically, the format of how we're going to go here today, guys, is one of us is going to talk about one of the serial killers. I'm going to talk about Robert Hansen. George is going to talk about Andre Chikatilo, and we're going to go that way. So for the first half, how do you want to do this? Do you want to talk about your guy first? Or do you want me to go with mine, and then you go after?
Actually, it doesn't really matter, actually. To be honest, no matter. You want to go first, or?
Yeah, sure. I'll touch on my guy first.
Yeah. And now as far as like what we're going to talk about, yeah, it's kind of like, keep it to a sort of like to a minimum, but give some nice information on this. So we'll talk about a little bit about the characteristics, how come they became killers, or what they're known for. For in case my guy Andre Chikatilo, he's got a lot of different things. I mean, I'm not gonna touch everything, but because some pretty gruesome crimes, but he was definitely not kind of like a little bit of a kind of like what you consider a weirdo in a way, and it's why you can see why he kind of grew up to be that way. And there's more information on him, which I'll get into in a little bit, and then we'll talk about again how they got caught a little bit, or what led them to be caught up, and what was the last verdict. I mean, were they caught? Were they sentenced to life imprisonment, death, or they killed in jail or in prison or something like that? So we'll touch bases on that, and we can, like I said, mention a few other, I guess, crazy stories or killers, within the time frame we have. But we'll speak to these 2 particular, bad guys.
Sounds good. So we're gonna hop into it. Before we do hop into it, 2 things I want to note: that me and George are both not licensed psychologists or psychiatrists. We're basically going off of the research that we fact checked for this episode, and we're gonna have you are going to see us reading off some things. It's just a lot of information on these guys, and while we do know a lot about them, there's going to be some things that we will have some notes to look at for. So I'm going to start with my guy here, Robert Hansen. He's known as the Butcher Baker of Alaska, and some pretty gruesome shit here. He, at least of what we know, he murdered 17 women between the years of 1972 to 1983. He got started early with rape, was where he started. But I'm going to start early from his childhood, and I'm going to go right through it. So, Hansen was, before I go, is my audio all right, bro? Sound good?
Yeah, it sounds great, bro.
All right, cool. So, Hansen was born in Etherville, Iowa in 1939. He was born to the parents of Christian and Edna Hansen. His father, Christian, was a Danish immigrant. So him and his father had a troubled relationship from his very, very early years of his childhood. His father was very, very strict with him, and he wanted him to be a certain way. Like, he wanted him to be, I guess, a very good speaker, things of that nature. Robert, as a child, developed a stutter, and he had bad acne at a very, very early age, which made him unappealing to a lot of women. It made him difficult to talk to women. A lot of women would make fun of him and stuff like that, stuff of that nature. Honestly, Robert had a very, very troubled childhood because of that. So a lot of serial killers, a lot of things do happen in their childhood. Robert was very, very, from an early age, like I said, rejected by women. A lot of women didn't want anything to do with him. They made fun of him and ridiculed him. He learned to resent those women as he got older, and it made him very, very angry towards women. And you're going to notice all of his murders dealt with women. He didn't murder any men. And a lot of serial killers are like that. A lot of serial killers are particular about who they murder. You look with Ted Bundy. You look with Jeffrey Dahmer. A lot of them are.
Yeah.
There's some serial killers that aren't, but a lot of serial killers are very particular. So Robert learned to resent those women as he got older. After he graduated high school and finally was able to leave Iowa, he went actually to Jersey, and in New Jersey he went and enlisted as a U.S. Army Reserve. He was over there for a year, and he became a very, very skilled marksman as he was over there.
Right.
Afterwards, he came back to Iowa, to Pocahontas, Iowa, and he also worked at the bakery part-time. Oh, yeah, by the way, his father owned a bakery. So note that. Obviously, the name Butcher Baker of Alaska, it's a very, very important fact, is that his father owned a bakery. So later on, you're going to realize that this was the profession that Robert took up as well. So, as I said, he enlisted into the U.S. Army Reserve, became a skilled marksman, and he served one weekend a month working in the bakery part-time. So after he came back a year later to the town of Pocahontas, Iowa, and he volunteered as an assistant drill sergeant over there. So he came back. He taught like younger kids a little bit about what he learned. And then in 1960, he fell in love and he actually married a local girl. Now, for the sake of her identity, we'll just call her Darla. So some of these names were protected for identity purposes. So when I was doing the research and looking at the stories, we'll call her Darla. It was the first girl he married. He fell in love with her.
And what year is this? This is
1960.
1960. Okay, so this is like 60 years ago.
He was born in 1939, so at this age, he was 21 years of age.
21. And he married. He first married, like his first marriage, correct?
Yep, this was. Yeah, you're gonna realize he got married again. A
lot of them do actually. It seems like a trend with serial killers. But anyway, wow, good episode so far.
Yeah, no. So he was 21 years of age, and Robert married, and this is where things became a little crazy. Robert was being overworked between the academy and the bakery. His father decided to limit his duties at the bakery when he came back to Iowa, and had someone fill in for him. So, for the sake of his identity, we'll call him Max. So a younger kid by the name of Max, he was a teenager, went to work at the bakery, and Robert would have conversations with him, and Max thought he was a little odd. He's like, something was off about Robert, but he didn't think anything of it. He's like, whatever. Things became twisted when Robert would tell Max things like he wanted to burn down the local barnyard that had all the school buses in it, because he hated like the town and like the high school that he went to and all the different stuff. This is where things became a little crazy. Like he was like, okay, but he kind of looked up to Robert in a way too. So he agreed to help him. So they got gasoline, they lit the entire barnyard on fire and set it on fire. Here's where the plot twist comes. The fire department was called, and Robert showed up to help put out the fire. He was also a part-time volunteer firefighter. And when he went to put out the fire, he kind of just like shook his head like, who would do this and stuff. Eventually, Max promised not to say anything, but out of fear and panic, he actually went to the cops and told the cops that he set the thing on fire, and he brought him with him. And outraged, his parents thought he was such a good boy and all this stuff. They didn't believe it. They got high-powered lawyers to take this to court because they thought he was setting him up. The guy who this kid worked for his own father's bakery, but he's like, he's jealous of Robert. So they took him to. They wound up taking him to court, and Robert wound up going to court, and his wife at the time in 1960. So I told you he got married in 1960, but before he got married, he did this fire thing. And as soon as he was questioned, they had no proof on Robert. So, he didn't walk. You're going to hear in a second. But what happened was his future wife, they started planning the wedding, and he wanted to marry her before if he was possibly convicted, just in case. And she made him promise at the wedding that he did not set fire to that barnyard. And he looked her right in the eye and said, "I swear to God, I didn't set the fire to it."
Right, but you really did though.
She said it. She said, if I find out that you did, I'm divorcing you. And he said, fine. So he actually wound up taking a plea deal. He took a plea deal. Because I guess he thought he was going to get killed. Not killed. I guess he thought he was going to be found guilty, and he took a plea deal. And when she found out, she divorced him. So he did it. He actually took a 3-year prison sentence where he literally served 3 years in prison as a model prisoner. So he kept his nose clean, and he actually didn't serve 3 years though. So he did 20 months. He was supposed to serve 3 years. After 20 months, he was let go on parole, even though he was diagnosed with having an infantile personality. In 1963, he met another woman. For this sake, we'll call her Evelyn. And she had 2 children. And in 1967, he had several jail sentences for petty theft. So Robert decided you'll notice Robert was a sadistic person. He actually experimented with different types of crimes, not just rape, not just murder, but he got into petty
torture.
Yeah, he got into petty theft though too. Like he became obsessed with like stealing and things of that nature. Now, in the late 60s, we'll get into his sadistic stuff. In the late 60s, Robert started to get into rape and torture. So in 1967, there was a woman who was a dancer at a club in the red light district of Anchorage, Alaska. So how he got to Alaska was he remarried in 1963, and him and his wife, they moved to Anchorage, Alaska, where Robert worked as a baker. He had a clean nose. They thought he cleaned up his act. During the day, he lived life as a regular person. He lived life as a regular citizen, like a model citizen. He was going to church. He worked as a baker. He was a loving, devout husband. But at night, in the late 60s, this is where Robert started to, I guess, harp on the urges that he had when he was younger. So in 1967, there was a woman who worked at a nightclub. She was an exotic dancer in the red light district, and she stopped late night after her shift for a cup of tea in a local diner. As she left, Robert approached her, asking her on a date. Now, note, Robert was rejected by multiple women as a child, right? He would ask women on dates, and like they wanted nothing to do with him because he had a stutter and bad acting.
He wasn't appealing,
Yeah, so she rejected him and was used to men approaching her. For this sake, we'll call her Laura. She was used to men approaching her, and so she rejected him not once, but she had to fight him off twice. Now, by the second time, Robert got upset. He pointed a gun right into her back and told her to get into his Pontiac. While she was in his Pontiac, he tied her hands together in the back seat of his car, drove 80 miles to a hotel outside of Anchorage, where he tied her to the bedpost, and he raped and tortured her all night. So he raped and tortured her. After this, this was his first encounter with raping a woman. So he raped and tortured her. After this, he actually put her back in his car after the end of the night, after he checked out, and she thought he was driving her home, and he actually drove her into the wilderness outside of Anchorage, and he let her get out of the vehicle. And there's some crazy shit too. He let her get out of the vehicle, and he told her to run. And there was a huge snowstorm in Anchorage at the time. He told her to run. If she ran and got lost in that wilderness, she was dying there. She got on her knees and begged him to spare her life, and that she wouldn't say anything to anybody. The entire time she was on her knees begging him, he was looking into the wilderness. He panicked, told her to get back in the car. He thought people were watching them. He drove her back to Anchorage, and after he drove her back, she pleaded with him again. "I promise I won't tell anybody." And she said, "Just as insurance, I'll give you my ID so you can get my license. You can have my address and everything about her." He liked the idea, but he actually asked her to give him her parents' information. So he said, "If you ever say anything, I'll murder your family."
Right.
And so she actually, the funny thing is, when she got home that night, she actually called her brother and her dad and told them, but she made them promise not to say anything to the authorities or say anything. But Her dad was
like, you know what I mean, of him like attacking there or probably killing the family.
yeah, her dad.
So
Yeah, her dad was actually a police officer, and
okay.
so just at the plea of her daughter, and I guess the safety of their own family, he didn't say anything initially, and he was a little worried that finding out that his daughter was an exotic dancer and a sex worker, that would put a stain on the family name. So he decided not to, because obviously in a police report that's going to reveal what her occupation is. So he decided not to say anything. This was on December 19th, 1967, and then 3 days later, on this 3 days before Christmas Eve, he had an encounter with another woman. This time he did the same thing. The woman was going to a convenience store to buy a soda on the way to babysit. So Robert, same thing. He put a gun to her. He lured her over to his car, and as he was talking to her, he put a gun to her, made her get in his vehicle, tied her hands together, drove her out to a frozen wasteland outside of Anchorage, about 15 miles, and told her to, well, I guess he was going to torture her and stuff. So she got out of the vehicle and she started running. Robert actually lost her. About 50 to 100 feet later, she actually fell to the ground. Again, there's a ton of snow on the ground. She wound up hiding from Robert. He couldn't find her. He actually drove off, but left there and hiding for all those hours. She actually froze to death. So police wound up finding her body, but it was because they were alerted by a construction worker who found her the next day out towards that way. They found her body and she was frozen. And for this case, we'll call her Annie. So Laura, remember the girl from the beginning who didn't say anything to the police, winds up seeing this happen. This comes up on the news and feeling responsible because she thinks that this was a similar situation to what happened to her. She thought it was the same guy. Feeling responsible, she winds up telling her dad that she wants to go to the police. She wants to go to the police about everything. She winds up going to the police about it, and Robert gets taken to court. Again, he goes for a plea deal. So because Robert didn't really there wasn't a ton of evidence on him, they thought that the lawyers were going to let him go because of his good behavior and how he had become a model citizen when he went to Anchorage. There wasn't a ton of evidence on him. Basically, Robert took another plea deal, and after a couple years, he was able to, again, he lived life as a model prisoner for those 18 months that he was in prison. He was in prison for 18 months, and he got a plea deal. When he got out of prison, that's when stuff started to, after 1967, that's when things started to get a little sadistic. So far, man, what are you kind of taking from this? It's kind of crazy, right? Like he started out with petty crimes. He started out with resentment from women, and then he kind of went into, then he started with rape and started with, this is kind of like how serial killer things begin. Not all serial killer stories are the same, but a lot of times this is how this type of stuff begins.
It kind of starts. It's always like an initial a sentiment, a resentment, a crime, or something like they feel was done to them, like they might have got bullied. So now they kill, like, people, like they see a group of kids, who are older, they'll go and kill people like that. They kill bullies, they kill people, that they couldn't, like, they weren't cool with them. If a girl rejected them, they might become sadistic and very weird in their mind and prosecute women. I actually saw a movie one time, bro. It was way back in the day, like in the 90s. It was a TV show, but one episode was about a teacher. He was like, I believe he was a professor, but he was like a sicko, and you'd kill women by stabbing them. So he killed the sister of I guess it's like an FBI agent, but it was kind of like, it was somewhere else, another country though, right? And then one of the heads of the FBI, one of the commissioners, ended up finding him. He tried to kill him, but the guy, the FBI agent, shot him for killing his sister, and actually, saved his boss in the process by shooting him 4 times and killed him. And this guy, he was an old professor, an old weird weasel-looking dude. He was very creepy, I guess you could say. And he was he was a killer, and that's what he did. But the thing with him, he was older, so he was somewhere in his 60s or early 70s, and he just like killed younger women because he was like I think his wife had left him, so he was really obsessed. That's the thing, bro. They become really obsessed, they're like brainwashed, and then they have tendencies of a killer. But then again, in this case, or even in Andre Chotilo's case, it's a little different. Like, it's like seems like they something made them go that way because they were just already kind of screwed in the head to begin with, because of rejections. They were mocked, they were made fun of.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of times serial killers do. Not all serial killers take the same path. Some are very well liked and things happen later in life, but a lot of times there's something in their childhood that causes them to act a certain way. Not that it's justified, but some people have issues. Now, Hansen was particularly diagnosed with bipolar disorder as well. There's a lot of people that are bipolar that don't kill people, but as you'll kind of see, he started spiraling a little bit. So actually, he served 18 months in prison after he did the plea deal. He got out, and it was actually hunting season when he got out. I believe he got out in August of 68. And when he got out of prison, it was hunting season. Now, this guy was an avid hunter. He was an avid hunter.
Yeah. He makes sense.
Yeah, so
he was hunting humans, not on animals.
He became an avid hunter, actually breaking several hunting records in the Anchorage, Alaska area. He was actually in newspapers.
How about that?
His weapons of choice were rifles and bow and arrows. And the year after his actual last record breaking, he was convicted of raping a prostitute and attempting to rape a housewife. So again, he went back to rape. Like even after this, like you see, like after that high, he got out of prison. He lived as a model prisoner, and he went back to rape again. This is the thing with these sadistic people. As I said, I'm no psychiatrist, I'm no psychologist, but a lot of times, people. This is not a one-time thing for these type of people. Once they get that urge and they get that feeling again, they need to do it again. It's not enough doing it one time, and it's never
It's never enough. Right. They always want to do it.
It's wrong to do it one time, but these people are like, there's nothing right about somebody doing it one time. But these people obviously get an urge, and that's when you start to see that there's something not right there. Well, anyway, in 1977, so he only served 6 months in prison for rape again. This time, like, only 6 months. So, like, I don't think the justice system was really doing their job. They didn't really think anything of this. They weren't taking the rape crimes that seriously here. And in 1977, later in 1978, he was imprisoned. You're going to see in the late 70s, he was actually imprisoned for stealing a chainsaw. So I don't want to get too far into the 70s. I want to kind of backtrack. But in 1977, he was imprisoned for stealing a chainsaw from a department store. Isn't that crazy?
That's crazy. It's kind of funny actually, but yeah.
Petty theft,
man. Back in the 60s. So you want to try? Would you try like emulate like the other serial killers or like the Chainsaw Massacre? It was just like one of those things. He had a chainsaw. He's like, you know what? I could do damage.
No, he just liked to. He just got into petty theft. And you're gonna notice he lied about a lot of things. There were insurance claims. He started to get into a lot of different stuff here. So yeah, you know what? I'll talk about the insurance claim stuff here. So this is kind of jumping ahead. This is to the early 80s. But while we're on the topic of petty theft, before I get into the murders, while we're on the topic of petty theft, he stole a chainsaw in 1977. He was actually put in jail. This was around November or December. He had his trial, I believe, in January, and then he only served until August of that year. He was released, diagnosed with bipolar disorder. They actually prescribed him lithium, but he wasn't required by law to take it. He was released, as I said, in August. And then in the early 80s, so in the early 80s, there was he got into even insurance fraud. In the early 80s, Robert lied to the police, and he actually lied to the insurance company and told State Farm that his trophies, his hunting trophies, and his like plaques and his awards were all stolen from his house, valuing $13,000. Now, there was nothing to prove that they weren't. So they actually gave him a check for $13,000. Robert used it to open up his own bakery. And then he also bought a plane. It was a Piper Super Cub bush plane. He bought a small plane for himself, even though he had initially been denied a license due to his medication. It's kind of crazy. You're kind of noticing. And you're going to find out how this dude actually murdered people. I'm going to get into the murders in a second. But this would actually use a plane to start murdering women. You're going to start noticing that he actually would kidnap women and then hunt them. Like he'd release them and hunt them.
And hunt them again. He was like playing cat and mouse game.
He would bring them into the wilderness and then he'd release them and hunt them, whether it was on foot or by plane, to hunt them and murder them, like using them as game. Like he would hunt animals, he would start to want to hunt humans.
Wow, yeah, he was really psychotic. He was sick in the head.
Yeah, he became sadistic with it. So as I said, I was just kind of talking. I'm going to back into the early 70s here, but this was in the late 80s with the insurance claim thing. This was in 1982 when he actually bought the plane. So when Hansen, you're going to notice that a lot of the women that Hansen abducted, he actually released them. A lot of them were too scared to go to the police. So a lot of the stories are not out of these women. They wouldn't talk to police. A lot of the stories are actually coming from Robert Hansen's own mouth. So during his later questioning, Hansen claimed that his murders, so I told you in the late 60s, early 70s, he got into rape. His killings actually started in 73 after finishing his final rape sentence. He became a serial rapist, picked up prostitutes from Anchorage's red light district, and he would rape and torture them. He actually later went and confessed that the ones that complied, he would actually return them to Anchorage alive. But the ones that didn't, he would murder them. He'd shoot them and kill them right there. He would kill them right there.
Right then and there. He just didn't give a fuck. He would just kill them, right? Wow.
Yep.
Yeah.
And from 1973 to 1983, Robert raped and tortured, and he would even cut them up to 30 different women, and who he released. 17 of the women between those years were less fortunate. After raping them, he'd release them into the woods and hunt them with a hunting rifle, whether that be on foot or by plane. His crimes first became known in 1982 when the body of exotic dancer, and I don't think she was a sex worker, but she was just an exotic dancer by the name of Sherry Monroe, was found near the Nick River by 2 off-duty police officers. So the story of Sherry's interesting, too, from the research that I've done. Sherry was, I believe she was 22 years of age, and Sherry, as it says, she was an exotic dancer at a club called the Wild Cherry in Anchorage, Alaska, in the Red Light District. She became an exotic dancer, but ultimately had the goal of finding a man to settle down with that would take care of her. Now, Robert, when he first started out with his rape crimes, he would meet women outside of the club. He started to fancy actually going in there after his rape sentence. So he started going into the actual clubs. He weighed some money over at her. She came over, and he went and was talking to her and asked if he could take her on a date. He would do that to a lot of different women in the club. A lot of them would reject him. She was actually shocked by it and thought that most men looked down on women who were exotic dancers. Shocked the fact that the man was actually asking her on a date and that he looked harmless, as he had a little bit of a start, kind of nerdy looking. She thought she could take him if anything did happen. She actually agreed to the date. Now, her friend, we'll call her Evelyn for the sake of it, was another exotic dancer, and she was at the club too, so she had known. She said it was a mistake. He was creepy. Don't go out with him. She couldn't be swayed. He told her he had a plane, he had money, all these things, and money talks. And she thought she was going to find the man that was going to take care of her. And
so she thought that he was the man to care of her, but really wasn't, though.
She thought he was harmless. She thought he was a nice guy. He goes to offer to take her out, and she couldn't be swayed. So she goes out with him, and her friend walks her down the block, lets her go with Robert. As soon as she gets in the car, he puts a gun at her. He points a gun at her back. He takes her over to the wilderness, and it was the same thing. Like he wound up torturing her, and so the story with Sherry is he attempted to torture her. He did the same thing. He actually tied her to the passenger side seat. He tied her hands to the passenger side seat. She was on her knees in the car begging him as she was tied up. Please don't hurt me. Please don't hurt me. As they got into the wilderness, about 15, 16 miles outside of Anchorage, he opened up the car door, and she got out to let her run, to hunt her, as he did with a lot of his victims. Right. She took a different approach. She didn't run. She actually hid behind the door, and when Robert was caught off guard, she went to tackle him. Robert pulled out he had a shell casing of, it was a 22 caliber rifle, and he pulled it out of his jacket and shot her dead. He actually buried her in the gravel there, and actually kind of got a thrill out of his conquest with this one. So this is when his crimes first became known in 1982, because they found her body. Yeah. It took them 2 weeks to identify her because her body had been so decomposed at the time. Oh yeah. But remember, I told you there were 2 other stories with the girl named there were 2 other stories when the circumstances happened. There were 2 deaths that occurred 2 years prior to that. 2 other women had been found in similar circumstances. The first was found.
They do.
Yeah, they were rape cases, but you're going to see actually 2 years before 1982, actually in 1980, these murders I didn't talk about yet. There were 2 women that were found prior to that. However, Robert had not been he was not included in these murder investigations because nobody knew. Those bodies were left out in the wilderness. One of them is now known as the Eklunta Annie. That's her name, Eklunta Annie, because she was found on Eklunta Road. And it has never, like, literally, the first construction by her body had never even been able to be identified. She was only identified, I believe, by her dental records because her body had been there for a year. So by that point, the body had decomposed so much that literally they don't even have, like, any mugshots of her. The second one was found topless, and she was an exotic dancer by the name of Joanne Messina. He picked her up in the summer on a beach. I remember this one, and it was the same thing. He tortured her, murdered her. And these were his first two murders. These were 2 years prior. Now everything was starting to come together because of the deaths were done in similar ways, the way Robert killed them, with Sherry Moreau, Eklunta Annie, and then Joanne Messina. So they were 2 years prior to those other two murders, but the Sherry Moreau one was in 82.
82, right.
And this was probably the most famous kill of him, or not kill, but this is ultimately what led to his demise. So in 83, June of 83, he went after a prostitute by the name of Sidney Paulson. You can tell he frequents prostitutes. He frequents exotic dancers.
He's going after them. Or he was going after them. He made it up a pattern.
And the reason why they said that Robert liked these types of women is he found a fascination with nightclubs, actually, back when he was actually in Cape May, at the fort in Cape May when he studied as a reserve in the Army Reserve. Not studied, but when he served as a U.S. Army Reserve. And he went to nightclubs out there. And he got a lust for exotic dancers and stuff like that because he thought they were below him. So he actually had confidence around them. Remember I told you he had a stutter, he had bad acne, he was rejected by women as a kid.
He felt comfortable to go and try to ask them.
He found a strange sense of confidence with like sex workers, like prostitutes, and with exotic dancers because he felt they were a little bit below him. They actually said his stutter would a little bit improve, according to Hansen's, like, the way he talked about it. He said that he actually felt more confident around those type of women. So in 83, it's crazy. So again, a young prostitute by the name of Sidney Paulson, she was spotted with a handcuff on her wrist by a trucker. I was actually watching a short clip on this. They reenacted it. And he gave her a ride to a hotel where she waited for a pimp and then called the police. When Anchorage police officers arrived, Paulson told him how a man had offered her $200 for oral sex, handcuffed her, forced her to gunpoint. And then he drove her to his house. Remember, Hansen still had a wife at the time. This was his second wife. This lady was still with him. And his wife and children were vacationing in Europe at the time. He brutally raped and tortured her. Afterwards, he drove her to an airport to put her in his bush plane, presumably to take her to the wilderness, again, to kill her. While he was loading the supplies, she fled. Paulson made a formal statement to the police, identified the color of the plane, and actually remembered its tail number. Now, she was found running down a highway. A guy put her in his truck. They called the police. She actually detailed the actual details of the plane. They got the plate number. They got the plate number because the security guard saw them looking at the plane, and he remembered the truck that came in with her. He actually looked at the footage. They got the actual his driver's license number. So they went to his house, and Hansen had an alibi. Now, she had said this in her story. So this was all corroborated. Like, he said, if you tell anybody that I did anything to you, I have two alibis that are waiting to tell them I'm with them. So he had hunter buddies. And his friends, who were his hunter friends. They would hunt with him. They were his hunter buddies when he would go hunting. They gave a false alibi for the night of the attack. No formal charges were initially filed. Now, on September 2nd, of 1983. This was like 4 months after the entire incident happened back in June. A body of another victim of Hansen by the name of Paula Goldie turned up, and the case was brought up again. Now, see, this dude just got away with something, and in 4 months, like, the dude, like, these are how these serial killers operate, man. They can't stay without that role for a little while. So Paula Goldie was found. Her body turned up, and the case was brought up again. Alaska investigators began looking into Hansen again. This time they contacted the FBI, who sent in a personal profiler by the name of John Douglas. He profiled the killer as having low self-esteem, a history of rejection by women, and being an experienced hunter. So those three things mixed together. He also
no self-esteem, rejection, probably was made fun of as well. So also a lot of I guess, how do you say it? He'd be embarrassed throughout his life, and then he was a good hunter, but he also had a crazy mind, it seems like. And yeah, a combination of a killer.
Yeah, exactly. And
Crazy, man.
he was also known for taking souvenirs from his victims. He would steal things like their jewelry, different things, and he would keep them as trophies when he was murdering women.
See? Just like a hunter. He thought like a weird hunter. He was brainwashed. Not brain dead, but definitely brainwashed. And
exactly. This is where things went downhill for him. So after those two hunter friends gave the false alibi, they actually had confessed that they had been lying over panic of guilt. The investigators wound up opening it back up and focusing on him. They brought him in for questioning, and while executing search warrants on his house as plain as cars, in his house they found a collection of weapons, including the .223 Ruger Mini 14, which he had used to commit his murders. They also found IDs of the women he murdered, their jewelry, and they also found an aviation map with several marked locations. Remember, I told you he used to fly and he would hunt women. He would hunt. When an FBI forensic lab matched the shell casings found near the victim to the Mini 14 found in Hansen's house, he made a plea bargain. Again, made another plea bargain. He was charged with 4 counts of murder he had found in an abduction and rape of Sidney Paulson, and he also agreed to confess to all of them. He also agreed to confess to all of them, give details about his victims, and show the burial sites on his map in exchange for serving his sentence in federal prison with avoiding public media. So the marked sites I told you he had on the aviation map were where he buried his women. So he's hiding them. So he would check them off. So he wanted ultimately no media publicity, and he agreed to comply. He had no media publicity. So he showed the police 17 burial sites, but he refused to help with the other 4. It's been theorized that he won't confess to killing them because they were neither prostitutes nor strippers, so he can't justify the murders himself. You see what I'm saying here? He looked at those women who were strippers and exotic dancers as absolute trash. That's how he looked at them. And he justified, in his mind, he justified their murders because he thought they were lower people than life. But the other 4, he wouldn't have to. Because he saw, but the other 4, those other 4, so there were 17 that he did admit to. The other 4 that makes 21, he would not admit to because the other 4 he actually saw as human beings. See that, dude? See, that's crazy. It's kind of just how it all kind of comes up. The victims were all found exhumed, and the victims were all exhumed and they were returned to their families. Ultimately, in 1984, he was convicted of murder, sentenced to prison plus 461 years. He was initially incarcerated in the penitentiary, actually in PA, Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. He was convicted. It was in the penitentiary over there, and then he was moved back to Alaska at the Lemon Creek Correctional Center, and then the Springwood Correctional Center. And in May of 2014, he was actually finally moved to the Anchorage Correctional Center to receive medical attention. It was undisclosed. They didn't really get into it too much. There was just lingering health conditions. But he actually died in August of the same year of undisclosed health conditions. And on his order, there was a do not resuscitate order on his file. So if he went into if he went into like cardiac arrest, there was something to not resuscitate, just let him go, because obviously he's a serial killer. Like they're not gonna anything like that. So that's basically the life of Robert Hansen. Like, obviously, you can tell he had a troubled childhood. His father, it just seemed like he was like never good enough for his dad, and like he was rejected by women at an early age, and there was a lot of different factors. He had bipolar disorder. There were probably some other disorders there too that weren't really disclosed. But basically, Hansen he targeted prostitutes from their mid-teens to their early 40s. That's the oldest woman I think he went after was 41. Was one of his victims. After soliciting them, he would abduct them, take them back to his meat shack by bush plane. He later stated that if they live, he would let them live if they submitted to his sexual fantasies. So if they didn't submit, obviously it was another story. As I said earlier, he was going to murder them.
It's almost like he gave them the rules and like, do what I say. If not, you're not going to make it alive. I mean, he was sadistic. He was very, very violent too. He seemed like, and also very almost like a deceive charmer kind of. That's actually very, very similar to the other guy we're going to talk about in a second, Andrea Chikatilo. Yeah, he was also very very much similar in many ways, and I'll get to him in a second. But Yeah, man, I see a lot of patterns. I mean, even though these guys are completely two totally different serial killers, unrelated. But another guy also that we don't got to talk about it, but he was an Italian serial killer in the 90s. Did something similar. He would kill couples having sex in the car. I was like, whoa.
Crazy.
Yeah, he was in the 90s, but he was called the Monster of Florence. We'll talk about it one day. I can find some information on him. It's everywhere. They even had information on the Italian channel and on the American channel. It was the investigative channel, but it was some, they have some footage from Italy and the subtitles, but they talk about this guy. Yeah, his last name was Pacciani. He was a killer. Very bad.
Exactly.
I mean, he killed.
Exactly. But I'm going to hand it over to you in just 2 minutes. I'm going to go through some of the list of the victims here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Some of them just really aren't named, but we'll say not. I'll go by dates too. His first crime was in 1960. As I said, it was the arson. Remember, in 1960, it was a victimless arson. He burned down a high school bus garage, and then from there, his next crime wasn't until 67. Cecilia Beth Zonton was murdered in 71. 72. Yeah, there's a lot of different things here. The main ones that I talked about were Sherry Moreau. You got Sidney Paulson, Paula Goldie, shot 3 times and redressed. So I'll go through those ones. Sherry Moreau was shot 3 times in the back. Her body was found on September 12th, 1982. Paula Goldie, who I talked about as well, she was murdered in, I think it was late August or early September. Her body was found on September 2nd. She was shot 3 times as well. Redressed post-mortem, and her body was found on September 2nd. Sidney Paulson was 17 years old, attempted abduction, raped, and tortured, but she escaped. She was the one that honestly led to his downfall, because as she got away, the 2 alibis were involved, and the 2 alibis wound up snitching. The 2 alibis basically wound up snitching, and when they snitched that there was nothing that went down, they investigated his house, and then they found matches between the shell casings. So that led to his demise. There's a lot of people involved here. A lot of them are just rooted as disappeared because, they never actually found their bodies, or if they did, they had to identify them by their dental records because the body at that point had been decomposed so bad. But that's basically the story of Robert Hansen. As I said, he was a troubled childhood. He dealt with a lot of rejection from many different women, and then he kind of took that out as he grew older. He saw sex workers as inferior, and then that's where he took his anger out. And he was an avid hunter, so you put a gun in a man's hands like that.
Right, who's already a gunner, who already shoots. That's crazy.
Give him a plane, and but like I said, during the day, he lived his life as a normal baker. He was a clean-cut guy, a devoted husband, a devout Christian. So, but at night, he was a whole different person. He frequented sex clubs in the red light district of Anchorage, and that's where he literally went after his victims.
His prey, right? Now, where were most of the murders? You said in Alaska, or they were kind of a little bit everywhere too?
No, they were all in Alaska.
Oh, in Alaska, right. Okay.
Near the Anchorage area. He took
Anchorage
them out.
area, yeah.
Anchorage.
I think it's southern Alaska, I think. Yeah, but so he did a lot of dirt around there. Yeah, wow. And they called him the baker. Yeah, it's funny because they always kind of give us serial killer a special name, like a baker, a butcher.
Yeah, he was the baker butcher of Alaska.
Jeez, wow. Yeah, it's crazy. That's crazy. Damn. Yeah, so what do you think about that? He was just a psychotic, huh? I mean, definitely. I mean, I think they've talked about him in episodes. I heard the name before, like scatter on TV screens, on certain shows. But a lot of shows premiere at night, or they'll debut at night. They'll show a lot of this serial killer type of shows, and some are interesting, some are not so much. To watch. I mean, depends. Like depending on who you are, you might watch one of them, and if you're into this kind of stuff, sometimes you don't watch it. Sometimes the night is too much, stress in your mind. You're like, wow. But I've seen a couple of these shows though. I mean, damn.
Yeah, man. There's a lot of crazy stuff with this, man. There's a couple books that I got my research from. If you guys are ever interested, I actually listened to a podcast series actually on serial killers. It's literally called Serial Killers, and it literally has a part 1 and part 2 of Robert Hansen's story. So if you want to learn more on that, you definitely can. And then there's also a book, I believe it's called Marksman. Let me just get my facts ready.
Yep.
Yeah, there's Butcher Baker. It's a true account by Walter Gilmore. So there's a lot of info in that one. It's literally called Butcher Baker if you're interested more on Robert Hansen. And then there's another. Yeah, this was the other one that I had looked into a little bit by Bernard DeClose. It's called Fair Game, and that's another one. There's another one that I didn't look into, but it's called Hunted on Ice by Reagan Martin. These are all books that were literally go over the life and the murders of Robert Hansen, like all of his crimes that he committed. So you can literally look into The Butcher Baker, Fair Game, or Hunted on Ice if you're interested in more. Or you can check out on Spotify. There's the podcast. It's a podcast on serial killers. There's a part 1 and part 2 on Robert Hansen. So feel free to check out. That was the research that I ultimately used here.
D, bro, D, that's what's up, man. Yeah, I mean, good. Good analogy there. Good research. Definitely were very crazy stories, but it is kind of a little different podcast today. It is kind of your discretion. It's advised. Discretion. It's a little different. So yeah, definitely very, very crazy, bro. And they probably have made a movie about him. They might have. Who knows, right?
Yeah, no, they have. There's a movie on him.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, Robert Hansen, man, he's crazy. I know the guy you're about to talk about. He's very well known, man. He's in the top 10 most notorious serial killers of all time. The Butcher of Rostov.
Yeah. So let's get into it then. So we talked about Robert Hansen. You broke it down pretty well. Steve talked about him in depth and mentioned some a lot of things I didn't know about him, although I heard about him a little bit too. So the next thing we're talking about is Andrei, as it's in Russian. Andrei, right, basically. Chikatilo. So Andrei Chikatilo is also known as the Butcher or also the Ripper. So usually the Butcher of Rostov, which is a city in Russia, Soviet Union, because at this point it was Soviet Union. Actually, funny fact about that is it's like when he was convicted around like 1990, and then in 1992, he was convicted. That's when it became Russia already. But before 91, it was still Soviet Union. So it's like all the crimes happened between 78 and 1990, all of his murder spree. But it was when by the time he was convicted, and he even tried to appeal to, and he wrote a letter to the Russian president, which was denied, and eventually he was sentenced. That was actually Russia at that point. So small little detail there. But so basically he was born in October 16, 1936, and he died on February 14, 1994 by execution. And just like Robert Hansen, man, he grew up a very weird, sheltered life. You know what I mean? He was born in he was born in the Ukrainian with his mom in the Ukraine, and it's the city was called. Let me see. So it's right here. Born. Okay, yeah, it was Yabluchne, Soviet Union, but it's a Ukrainian SSNR, right? He was born there, 1936. Growing up, he definitely had some problems. He also was very awkward, and he had some self-hatred, it seemed like he expressed. Also very shy with women. Matter of fact, he also could never approach anybody, and when he did, it's like they always kind of found him very awkward. It's like he didn't have confidence in himself, and his appearance made him look kind of weird, almost like creepy in a way. So he didn't have a very great ratio with women, to say the least. Very few times any female, in fact, actually will talk to him. Most time you wouldn't get, they won't talk to him. Some facts about his early life. Again, his adolescent life was very, closed in. He didn't really show nothing particularly wrong with him. Like he wasn't like, how they say serial killers, like they torture animals or kill animals. Sometimes they bully somebody or torture people who are younger than, you know what I mean? Play around with knives. They said they actually pee their bed. And that's kind of funny, but it's actually one of the facts about potential serial killer: torturing animals, narcissistic or very socially awkward behavior, being way too quiet. Also, again, I said torturing animals, deceivement, and also playing with fire. Playing with fire is definitely a trait that they say. So he didn't really have none of these traits except for shyness with women. He was kind of, like very awkward with them, and in fact wasn't really dating nobody until his sister kind of when he moved to his parents' house when he was around 20, and his sister at the time she was 19. She actually was the one that kind of tried to hook him up with his first, with some women, try to help him out, just kind of help the situation. And he was married, but it was by arrangement. He was actually married in let me see 1 second. Let me just double check this. Through his sister and his brother-in-law, because his sister married a local youth and she had moved away from him. And also, this is actually stated by his sister. She did not see any awkward behavior when she moved away. You know what I mean? After she moved from him and married. So he was married in 1963. He was married to a woman named Fedosia Adnacheva, and he was introduced by his sister. Although he was attracted to her, his marriage was not really effective, bro, and he was arranged, right? And another thing about this, and you're gonna laugh, but we'll get there in a second, about Andrei Chikatilo, is that he actually had problems apparently with erection. Apparently he couldn't get erected, and that was one of his main things with women. The women he did actually talk to and he could actually date, according to the information I gathered, he really had a problem with sexual erection. He really couldn't perform. It seemed like, and this is gonna be kind of funny, but eventually, dude, he substituted his penis for his knife. Jeez,
Yeah,
I don't even laugh, but
yeah, yeah, man. You're absolutely right, man. I remember that's funny, man. I obviously didn't do a lot of research on him, but I know that the sexual inadequacy was definitely a big thing with him, man. Like he would he was unable to perform, and that frustrated him even more, man. It just made him feel more sexually inadequate as a man.
Yeah. So I got notes on this, and I don't take my time on this a little bit. I kind of do it more like I'll read some stuff as well as talk about some stuff as well, obviously. But so someone else did yesterday. He seemed like, to the people that knew him at first, he seemed like almost like in a way, like, although he wasn't very popular, because he was just, number one, he was socially awkward. Let's get it off the rip. He was not a really friendly person. But I guess with dudes and grown people and all that, but parents, he's okay. It's like mostly with women, and particularly girls like his age, growing up, he had a problem with. So that right there tells you why he would have acted, which I mean, not to excuse or nothing, but I mean, it's just like the way like his life kind of came up and how he ended up becoming very socially awkward and frustrated. Again, not that it's an excuse, but it just kind of helps you understand a little why he did some of the things he did, or why he turned out so screwed up in the head and so fucked up as a person. Very similar to Robert Hansen, right? So that was one of the things. And again, when he would go on dates with women, it's like he would develop a weird fantasy, and the only way he can really I guess like get off or really like have sex with women, any kind of intercourse, we'll just use certain terms. I don't want to use very offensive terms. The whole thing is very offensive in a way, but not because of it's just how it is, because of truth. I mean, it just sucks.
Yeah, you can honestly go ahead, bro. Viewer discretion. Like if nobody wants to watch it, they don't have to. Feel free. Because these types of things, man, there's no real easy way to be like PG about it.
No.
Like it just
this is PG-16. We'll keep it PG-13 another time, but
this ain't for the young kiddies in the room.
Yeah. Well, I just got a text. Somebody's watching our podcast right now, and somebody said, "Where's the link?" So I'm like, "Oh man, I'm in the middle of the podcast." But
yes.
People can also watch it after he goes live, and after the premiere of the episode. Obviously, people can watch it tomorrow, so that's good. But back to the serial killers here. Back to Andre here. So So also nothing I discovered during my research yesterday, actually, that he apparently had tried to hang himself one time because a lot of women had rejected him, or the girls, like his first ever date at 17, he went on a date, and everything seemed okay for him until he kind of like, it was time to, I guess, like kind of like make a move and, get more romantically, and, for the date to go more, in an erotic sort of, heading, path. And he couldn't really, do much. He was very, not just shy, but he was very, very awkward with women generally, so I guess he couldn't really, perform, didn't know how to talk to them, didn't know how to, to get at what, what he wanted, as far as, like to, mingle with them and, interact. So it was very awkward with him. And he developed almost like a fear and a phobia, but not just a phobia, almost like a hatred. And, it became all weird. Like the only way for him to have fun or to really even, like, I guess whatever he considered, like his pleasure was to really torture them. And it just spiraled out of control. And we'll get to that in a second. So he did actually have a couple decent jobs before we get a little more to the gruesome part of things. And again, I'm going to take my time with it, but I don't want to say some things that don't need to be really said. But he actually worked, apparently a little bit with the like railroad system, always by like a lot of times he worked like by like train rails. It seemed like, he was definitely in that kind of like environment or the kind of profession. And so he did while living in a Nigzi Tagil, I can't even say that. I think it's Tagil, Nigzi Tagil. He undertook a correspondence course and engineered, in engineering with the Moscow Electronical Institute of Communication. He worked in the Ural Mountains for a while, for maybe like 2 or 3 years. And then he was drafted in the Soviet Army, which is known as the Red Army. This is in 1957, so this is definitely in communist times, to a T, which was also a very different way of lifestyle for anybody. You know what I mean? It was a different communist Russia than it is in capitalism, or how it was in capitalist America in the 60s and 50s and 70s and everything like that. So okay, after coming back, he returned to his native village with his parents, and he that's when his first relationship was with a young divorcee, which didn't last much. And after basically the girl, he couldn't get erected. She asked her friends for some help, and then that's what kind of he got like almost like rumors started to spread that he couldn't perform, and that's how everything kind of started with him, which is what led him to want to commit suicide. But he didn't. He was saved. Apparently, his cousins, his cousins, and his actually it's funny, because there's actually women that saved him. Saved his life once, to try to hang himself, and there was actually his female neighbors. So there are women who saved his life, and he tried to hang himself because it was, according to him, was actually the shame. He couldn't really bear the shame, and that's what kind of led him to a couple of things. So moving forward, now with him is also another thing that's kind of weird, right? He he was able to actually have kids with the wife that he actually married, although they were divorced after 69. When she had in 1969 she had a son. In 65 she bore him a daughter, right? And the only way he did it was actually through masturbation. So it was almost like, I don't know. You know, some people like sometimes say like if you're in jail and there's no conjugals, you can actually, I mean, there's ways, you know, to impregnate a woman, but you don't have to actually have sex. I mean, it's like almost like a donor, like sperm donors do something similar, and the whole other, you know, ways of, I guess, impregnating a woman without actually sexual intercourse. So that's how he did it. It was, you know, kind of a weird way, but he actually, his first and only wife, I should say that, because he didn't get married again. He only got married once. Did bear him 2 kids. Like you said, like the previous serial killer, he had kids. He had somewhat of an unsuspecting lifestyle or life at first, but as he gets deeper in his murders, things, you know, start to unravel, and, you know, and a lot of things get revealed in his case. And he was really a sicko. I mean, he did some things, man, like, whoa. And the thing with him is he killed in many ways. You know, you'll get to find out that his best friend was his knife, apparently. He'll consider his knife like his 6th finger. So that's weird.
That's why they call him a butcher, man.
Yeah, he was really a butcher, man. I mean, I don't mean to laugh. It's kind of like in a sick way, but I mean, I was like, wow. Like, he just like, yeah, I don't know, man. He just didn't care. He didn't give a shit, apparently. But anyway.
Yeah, when we get to the end, when you're at the end here, when we get to the court spot, man, there's some interesting stuff to happen there too, man.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'll talk about it. If you want to chime in, feel free to, you know me, chime in. You actually probably could help me a little, because I know you done some research on him too. So if you want to chime in, it's fine. Don't worry about it. But yeah, kind of like the previous guy we talked about, like Hansen. He was also seems like he turned to a petty life of crime, like theft and like stealing. Like he was fired from a job in which is worked in Moscow for stealing, and his teaching career. So he actually was a teacher. So he enrolled as a correspondence student at Rostov University in '64, studying Russian literature and philology, as well as, you know, some a little philosophy and a few other things. So I mean, obviously he knew a little about psychology and all that, but he couldn't really help himself. And philosophy, like, he wasn't like what's it called, inadequate or illiterate, but he still had problems. And again, it was more like social problems. You know, so he had the position for a year. Then he became a teacher in the Russian language and literature in the, I'm going to be careful not to try to butcher his name. It's very hard. Novoshatikatskin. Yeah, he was in that place. But also was an effective as a teacher because he was, again, knowledgeable in most of the subject, but he couldn't really keep discipline in class, could never engage in class, could never become like a kind of like a cool teacher. And he was always, again, kind of awkward. Some teachers got to develop their personal friendship with kids. He couldn't do that. So he was often made fun of by young kids and ridiculed and mocked, and, well, you know the rest. So yeah, so that was one of the, and again, this is very relevant. I said to say this will kind of carry on later on, because he seems like, from my gathering, you don't seem like he ever really killed a man. He killed males, but not grown men, mostly younger children, ages like 8 all the way to about 18 or 19, maybe 20. I think he did kill a 25-year-old, but that was about it. He didn't really kill males who were over like 22, 23. I think
it was just women and young girls.
Yeah, women, young girls. Young boys too. He definitely killed some young boys and male. Like I said, all right. So let's put it this way: his oldest male victim, keyword, oldest male victim was 25. All the males were not even 18. So he just happened to be one guy, but all of them were like actually young boys. But however, he killed more girls than he killed young boys. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. He was involved in child molestation of both sexes. What was his youngest victim? Was it 9 years old? Right, I believe.
Yes. And that's actually. Since you took it there, let's start with that one. So yeah, the youngest victim was actually 9, and initial murders, which happened in September '78. So just like it's funny how Robert Hansen and him probably not the same age. Actually, wait, I believe he might have been a little older than Hansen. But here's the thing: Hansen started killing a lot sooner. He seems like Chikatilo actually had some jobs and actually lived like a decent, I guess, you know, normal life. As somebody, you know, wants to, you know, like live an honest life, earn an honest living, you know. I mean, he had a college degree, he had went to school. He didn't have like a terrible life, minus again the fact that he just had a very, unfortunately for him, you know, and he ended up being, I guess, his demise in a way. And whatever, I mean, if you call the devil taking over his mind and making him become obsessed or fucked up in head to kill women and children. But he had a job, he just couldn't really perform with women. He couldn't really talk to them. And the girls he did actually go on dates with, he just couldn't really, you know, he got weird. I mean, to the point where his 6th finger was a knife. I mean, if that's what you think, you're pretty, again, obsessed guy, very disturbed, kind of fucked up in head a little bit to begin with. But again, didn't really show a lot of signs. And again, I'm not a psychologist, neither are you, but he didn't show a lot of signs except that neglect, that he just seemed like he just didn't have a nice social life. And even with kids, he just wasn't good with kids. And the jobs did have, most of it backfired on him. Mostly because he was incompetent, and because he wasn't an effective teacher, and because he stole. it's funny again. See correlations between the two killers. Petty theft.
Yep. Yeah, they got an addiction to crimes, man. So
Yeah, and it gets worse. It gets better in a sick kind of way, but because I mean, the fact that they were petty thieves. I mean, also small time burglar. I mean, he still nothing crazy that was reported, but definitely on the record that it seemed like he had a small small petty theft, petty crime. You know what I mean? Ripping off his boss. Lying. You know what I mean? Manipulative things, theft, fraud, a little bit, stuff like that. So,
Ooh.
Also
This guy
before we go on, before we go on to the main points of murder, he had some like sort of like a initial sort of like how can I say it? Like encounters with women, and they were kind of awkward. Like for example, let me see, when was this? This was in 1954. After graduating, right? After graduating college, he actually had a situation where a girl accused him of trying to grope her, and he kind of went at somebody, in a weird way, like just trying to talk to them, but he got kind of funny, like that. Like I guess he got a little too fly and fresh, and no means no, and he kind of tried to grope a girl. Long story short, she accused him, but it was kind of he was able to not like really like to avoid anything, because I mean it was just basically like he tried to grab on her, like touch on her, grope her. So it was more like it was settled like it was like a warning. I think like police like were called, but nothing really was transpired, and he ended up leaving the city anyway. So they never nothing really caught up to me that. But on the onset of puberty, again, because he discovered he was a chronic impotence, like he really couldn't get aroused or whatever. So and he worsened his awkwardness. So in a company woman, he was weird. By the age of 17, he became acquainted with a girl, and like through a job he had at a newspaper, and he actually tried to ask her on a date, but it didn't work out that well. And also in the same year, he jumped an 11-year-old friend of his sister's, and as he was playing resting on the ground, he actually ejaculated on the girl as she struggled for his grasp, out of his grasp, for help. So he had unfortunately, he had a very right, yeah, it sucks. I mean, these things, bro, there's like, whoa, like how the fuck? I mean, it gets even worse. This is nothing, by the way, but he really problem with he would hold women down and just basically sort of like have his way. Even though I mean he might not have raped a couple, like this one he didn't rape, but he still kind of like it was like a form of rape, basically, form like of harassment and sexual sort of like what's the word, harassment, violence. I mean, it was like just ejaculation. He's done it before. He said apparently a couple of them, but it was just one of them. So his first rape victim was in 1973, and I'm not going to say all the names. I'm not going to mention all the crimes either. It's too much to really mention in an episode, but I'll just kind of like run through a little bit, a couple of them. So he assaulted one of his pupils. That's how he started. He actually, as a teacher, so that's why he's still a teacher, and this is how his teaching career ended in 1981, but in 1973, so 8 years before that, he actually swarmed him towards a 15-year-old girl and groped her breast and genitals, and he molested her. Yep. Okay, well, that's kind of gross. I don't think I want to say that one, but yeah, she tried to escape from his grasp, and he handled, he did what he did, he did his business, you know what I mean, and you know what I'm trying to say, but yeah, ejaculated, and that was it. So he did one of those things, and again, a lot of crimes seemed like I guess at those times, or seemed like he was getting away with a lot and getting swept under the rug. Exactly how, I'm not sure. I mean, it just seemed like he was just, he saw the union. A lot of people, again, kids were young, they were scared, they didn't want to, it's almost like he's a Freddy Krueger without being Freddy Krueger. I mean,
I know what you're talking about too with the story from 1973. Yeah, he groped the girl. He groped her breasts and her genital region, and he he got into it with her, man. Yeah, it's kind of crazy, dude. I think that's kind of, I think that was where his first known sexual assault began, was in 1973, I believe.
Yeah. So basically, yep, exactly. Like I should have said, he was never actually he was never punished or even like really brought to like accountability or culpability for any of the accidents.
Yeah.
Right. Nor was any of the occasions the fellow teachers observed. Okay, so yeah, Chet Lingo found himself in the presence of his students. Yeah, he fondled a couple of them. He was groping on them, touching them, doing a lot of things. Funny thing is, he also did it to a boy, but it seemed like he was torturing boys. He would do it to boys more like with some pedophile shit, but more like just to fuck with them, like to crush their mind. But with girls, he really was trying to actually like not just like molest them, like like just like a pedo, but he was really trying to like rape them, do a lot more. He was doing some really fuck shit, bro. I mean, really greasy things, which I mean, damn. Some stuff I read yesterday were like gruesome, so I was like, man, the hell with this. But anyway, so
yeah,
on the evening of the 22nd of September of 70, I'm sorry, December 22nd of 78, he lured a 9-year-old girl named I just call her we'll just call her Zena Z. We'll call her Zena Zakhtov.
Yeah, this is brutal.
Yeah, it's brutal. Right. So he gets to a secretly purchased house, basically a spot that a lot of people don't know about. Attempts to rape her but failed. To achieve an erection, of course, when the girl struggled, he choked her stepmother 3 times in the abdomen and ejaculating while stabbing her child. Yep. In an interview in 1990 for the rest, yeah, he recalled immediately stabbing her and said that the girl said something very hoarsely. So he strangled her, consciousness, yeah. And he threw her body somewhere in a river, in some kind of river. So, and the body's found 2 days later. Ironically, there was no kind of sign of nothing that he had done anything. So, I mean, I guess in the beginning, serial killer raped his career. Again, just like the Robert Hansen, serial rapist, serial killer, but he's raping young girls and as well as older girls. Whereas Hansen had a obsession with prostitutes. So it differs a little. But then again, it doesn't mean that Andre Chikatilo would never actually try to rape a prostitute. It's just that he seemed to go after women and kidnap them or lure them, or young girls, it seemed like. Because again, he was a school teacher at one point, so he had a lot of access. Sick son of a bitch he was, this guy. But
yeah, man, he's a sick dude. Like that's what I said. I'm like,
yeah, bro. You see what I'm saying, bro? I don't want to read or even say because I got more. Some are notes, some are actually I got online, but I don't want to say a lot of them. But I'll touch on the main ones. Like you said earlier, at the very end when you finish with the guy that you're covering, there was a whole list. There's a whole list. I mean, I don't think I want to.
He's got more than Hansen. He's got over 50, dude. It's
by far. Hell yeah.
He's got like 50 to 60. Like it's way too much to go off, man. But yeah, the 9-year-old, it's just, man, what does it take to really to rape, torture? He ejaculated on her as he stabbed her because he couldn't get an erection. But he wanted to rape her. He wanted to. I mean, he went into that situation trying to rape a 9-year-old.
Well, that's what I'm saying. He would literally. I know it sounds crazy. He would rape them with his knife, or he would rape them. But it seems like his penis wouldn't work unless he was being violent or really getting in a volatile, vulgar sort of way. And whether he's a sadist or not, he was a molester and he was a violator and a beater. He was a beater. That's what he was. He was a beater. He was an abductor. And I mean, that's just I did it. Now, funny thing with him is, or a thing that I'm really noticing is he was doing a lot of them by trail roads, and he would lure into the woods, into like a close hotel nearby, or talk to them. And maybe the way he appeared, which is funny or ironic because he was really not really well equipped with game to talk to any girl or any kind of ability or even people, but he was better to talk to people, normal people, like dudes, people his age. With women, he would learn them. He probably just uses psychological sort of tricks. Again, he was a teacher, so he was actually fairly smart, but just not very socially, there. And he would kind of do it that way, and he would kind of catch them and lure them in, and then from there he would just know when to see him around. So he was slick. Whereas Hansen was more ballsy. Seemed like he was just driving around and use some confidence with strippers. It's a little different situation, but a lot of similarities between 2 sick men, 2 perversive men. Both of them were perversive. Let's not get that twisted.
Yeah, they were.
Yep. So there was one number piece of evidence were actually found in the murder, but you know what I mean. It was never really confirmed, or it could never be put together and stuff like that. So also neighbors had actually seen that he had been present the day of the evening of the 22nd of December. So again, things that tied him up to the murder scenes, but it just seemed like the police or whoever, the investigators that they've investigated, which I don't think they investigated at the time. I mean, they did, but they no evidence of him. When they had evidence of him, it was already it'd been years. So it's they had to really reopen some cases and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, it gets there, man. So let's see, a couple other murders he did. So between 78 and 80, he committed quite a few murders. Okay, let's see. He tried a murder in 1979. So he was actually following the Zakanova's murder, he was still unable to achieve sexual arousement orgasms, only to stabbing and slashing women and children to death. And then he claimed the urge that he relieved experience overwhelmed him. But again, he did stress that initially he struggled to resist the urges, and then he tried to apparently. So he was basically saying that he didn't want to do it, but the urges made him want to, go on a. I guess after the first murder, there was a wrap. He was hooked. You know what I mean? Like they all do.
Oh yeah. He just got his first high, man. That's all it took.
It's a high. I mean, it really is, bro. I mean, I don't know. I can't say I never met a serial killer as far as I knew. I mean, I met somebody who happened to be one, but I never knew he was. So who knows? But I do know that with studies that I've done, the serial killers have some kind of it's like an urge, and they just. I mean, yeah, it's just like a thrill. It's like part of their. It's part of their. They're kind of like their. What they feel, what they go through. I mean, it's not just their agenda. They have an agenda, right? It's to kill, but it just goes, to show you that like it's like a disease that and then they do kind of be isolated, put like in asylums because they are crazy. And some serial killers, his history, not him particularly, but others have commented on that, have actually confessed and actually have killed people, and while they confess, they were confessing a murder, but they're just they're like, I can't stop killing, I'm killing. There was the Weeping Killer. This would be a killer in 1980, a Weeping Killer. Yeah, I used to watch a lot of shows on killers and those TV documentaries. So I actually learned a lot, even of FBI files, and I talked about stuff like that. But we'll get into that another time, perhaps, maybe another episode, or maybe a little later. But yeah. So anyway, so back to what we're saying. So on September 3rd, 1981, he encountered a 17-year-old boarding student named we'll call her Laura Teach, to kind of protect her identity. Although I will be dropping some actual names here, so it doesn't matter at this point. The man is dead and the victims have all died. But to protect their identities, we're not going to name all of them, okay? And again, see, same things. At a bus stop, and she exited a public library in Rostov city center. So apparently, he lured her after the confession. He lured Miss Laura T to a forest near the Don River with the pretext of drinking vodka and maybe relaxing and just having a conversation with her. She apparently bought a lie. See, when they wanted to, I guess it could be a little persuasive, but it's funny how they both were awkward and couldn't get a woman to talk to them for nothing. But when it came to killing, they could somehow lure them in. It's mind-boggling.
Right. Absolutely.
Crazy, right? So, yeah, and so when he failed to again, he got her, trying to grab the girl again, same thing, ripped her clothes, have sex with her, attempting intercourse, and again, as she remonstrated against his actions, tried to fight back. When he failed to get an erection for the 100th time, he always happened to him apparently. He actually shoved mud in her mouth to stiff her screams before battering her and strangling to death. He'll strangle them, and the sickest part is that he actually sometimes will finish them in sex or finish them off. Pause. I got to be careful with this one, but as he would any kind of ejaculation, sometimes they would be dead or they'll be near death, or just maybe sometimes they'll be like, you sound again. I don't want to gross you out, bro. I'm sorry if I am, but he would actually like murder them. But as they were dying, he would just like grip them, so they'll be too scared. But no one really survived his wrath. He was way more violent than Robert Hansen. He wasn't like, if you're copper, he might let you go, and he had no ounce of heart. He seemed like. So yeah, man. I
he masturbated on his victims, and he killed a lot of them. Like, it just
a lot of them did, yeah, not all of them, but a lot of them did, yeah, masturbate on them, yeah, wow, sick shit. And then so he killed it. He mutilated the body with the teeth and stick, and ironically, he loved to take the guy gouge the eyes. He gouged a lot of the eyes, a lot of times too.
Right.
So, some evidence concluded that a lot of these injuries had been committed by knife, and again, his weapon of choice was knives, but he also apparently had guns too. It's not like he didn't. Like, he would murder them sometimes with a knife, with a stick, or a small, like even a dagger. He'd use small razor torch, like nail clippers, or carve them up. Big butcher knives. He was a butcher for a reason. That's why they called him that. It's almost like his knife became his tool of choice. But he was also known to have guns. And again, serial rapist. He was a serial rapist. Thief. Convict, because he actually was arrested. So he was arrested in '84 after committing he had done only 14 murders, and he also encountered, let me see. Yep, a 13-year-old who was walking home from shopping the trip. Okay, and then they worked together. Approximately a quarter mile after the path, he was actually seen by witnesses in the bushes. That he actually pounced upon her and dragged her nearby. Wow. Yep, and again, he killed her by tearing off her dress, stabbing her, slashing her, and also choking her and slashing her to death as he immediately performed intercourse. Yep. So her body was found on June 27th of 19, and we're talking about 1982. So at this point, we're about 3.5 years, 4 years in his career as a killer rapist. Now, here's where it gets tricky, right? In 1983, there was an investigation on him. I think you know about this. And in '84, they actually were able to get him only based on scattered evidence, but because the Soviet Union was so strong with the evidence, it's like nothing could really, like, they knew that he had been around the scene. It seemed like he was a suspect in some of these killings. They could never prove it because here's the thing. It's almost like there was no conclusive evidence to say that he was actually there. He was there, but it was never, no real blood was found. Or if it was found, evidence had been lost. And again, I don't know. Again, I don't know the whole story because I didn't read the whole thing like a couple times. I probably should read a little more. But based on what I read, it seems like it was more like a lack of forensics at the time in the Soviet Union. It seemed like they had evidence, but we're talking about 82, 83, or between 78 and 82 in a 4-year period. 82 is not 2020, 2021. The evidence would not be the same as these days. They can find you out like in a week. You be found in a month. Possibly you could be on a run, or you could avoid the cops and the authorities and all that. But how much can you in this day and age with all this forensics, all this technology? You know what I'm talking about, Steve? they can find you, goddamn. If they want to find you, they'll find you. You know what I mean? It's not unless you leave the country and you really on a run. It's a manhunt. It's not that hard. A manhunt for him was only issued in 1990. We're talking about over a decade before his first murder, and about 9 years before he really, start to really get like a taste for it. You know what I mean? 78, he got his first victim. He killed a few people in 79. It seems like he was pretty quiet, possibly one murder, but in 1980 he killed 2 people. But it gets better, man. And again, I might not, for time, measurement, I might not talk about all the murders he did, but he was a very brutal guy. And it seems like you know about him a little too, because it seems like you've done some research on him too. So
yeah, no, he's brutal. I've watched some documentaries on him, man.
I watched one back in 2018, bro. But I remember I told you I kind of knew a little about him, but now it's like I learned a lot hell of a lot more about him. I'm like, geez, man, this guy he's up there with Hansen. I don't understand how they don't talk about him enough about as being a serial killer. I mean, he might be worse than Ted Bundy, maybe not worse, but up close enough. But definitely top 10, top 20 serial murderers, killers of all time, hands down.
Yeah, it's brutal, man. It's lethal, the stuff he did. In some ways. So Bundy is more known than Chikatilo, obviously. Bundy and Dahmer are probably the most known, but Chikatilo, his murders, man. He killed a lot of people, and a lot of his murders were very, very gruesome. I think he's one of the worst, man, to be honest.
Jesus Christ, bro. If serial killers had an Oscar award, this guy would be on the top of the list, man. This guy was a motherfucker, bro.
And his murders were in Russia, right? They were in Russia, right?
Oh, yeah, or Russia. Soviet Union, so modern day would be Russia, somewhere Ukraine. But apparently, so he actually was in Uzbekistan. He did some work in the Uzbek border. But then, remember, back in the 70s, this was still Soviet Union. And we're talking about the 60s, actually, because he worked in the Ural Mountains again. Excuse me. He had a decent upbringing somewhat, but just very confused, very broke mentality, very weird in the head, very like he couldn't get a girl for anything, and when he did, it was really awkward. He couldn't talk to them, so he developed a taste and a thrill for killing them and hurting them. He was a violent guy. He was a guy that hurts people, a sadistic, a beater, an abuser, a bone breaker. I mean, he would break their thumbs, he would choke them, he would just put his hand on them and on their face and just grab them. He had an obsession of grabbing them when he's, their face and just grabbing in their eyes and gouging them. Matter of fact, one of the reasons how they caught him is because they pieced a lot of evidence together and they were saying okay, the way you gouge him, a lot of similarities, and eventually forensics did go in his disfavor. He was actually, somebody bit a piece of his finger off. He never cared to really get it was a pretty severe wound, right here, I guess. So a piece of his bone had broke. They found the bone, but it took him 2 years to really prosecute him and really use it against them. So they found pieces of his DNA and of his literally pieces of him. I mean, it's crazy to say that way, but in some sites. And this is when he killed a little boy. He was strangling a little boy, and he actually bit his finger, so he killed him. And as he actually choked him with his hands, and he choked him, he gripped him up and choked him with his shirt, and put him in some kind of, I guess, a grip, like a shitty version of an actual choke. And as he killed the dude, one of his eyeballs popped out. See, bro, it only gets better, man. And I mean, geez, bro, I'm glad we put a disclaimer, and I'm glad we have this little different platform. By the way, this show looks great, dude. I like everything with the podcast, and the headlines here and everything. We can even put our topics here eventually, but we'll get to that behind the scenes. Yeah. Hope you guys are liking the podcast so far, because the platform, well, the app we're using, which is StreamYard, is a little different. Yeah, StreamYard. So,
yeah, it's a new platform. So yeah, we got some comments coming in too. So this is easier for us. We don't have to post links or anything like that. We can literally just stream right to where we need to stream to, which is great.
Yeah. Yes, sir. So real quickly, just talk about for a few minutes. Sometimes talk about the arrest, right? And then we'll skip to the end of the murders. Then we'll talk about the ultimate arrest and his murder. You'll see how he gets executed in the weirdest way. He gets executed in the most ironic. We'll get to it in a second. But so anyway, so in January.
Yeah, there was no justice in his murder.
Nah, well, I mean, come on. Why lawyer couldn't really? He was literally just found guilty. Not to mention in Russia back then, criminals didn't have much choice anyway. I mean, even a murder, they might have been justified. I mean, they didn't have a lot of a legal team to really help them, and they were not treated the way criminals were treated in America back then, or even now. How the criminals have a lot more rights. Even the most hardcore criminals here will get a fair trial, which is it's weird, but I mean, it's just part of how we have our rules. But back in Russia in '84. Or back in the 80s, or even the early 90s, because his trial was actually 92. He was sentenced in 94. So in 1992 is when he was actually found guilty. And hold on a second. my bad. Somebody was actually calling me. I don't understand why people call me during the show, but anyway, I have to take care of that real quick.
Yeah, no problem.
So, yeah, so he killed 2 women in 84, and totally he killed. He also in March of 84 he lured a 10-year-old boy named Dmitry. I'll just say his real name on this one. I mean, I want to cover some names, but some I just said real names. Patishnikonov, Dmitry Patishnikonov, Patishnikov. I'm sorry, he's a Russian last name. So he lured him again. And now see again, I keep repeating myself: luring, distracting him, stealing their time, lying to them, be like, "Oh, come help me real quick. What time is it?" It's almost like he would rob them, but just kind of lure them and just grab him, and not even a gunpoint, a knife point, or he just used. But he was an adult already, so he would abduct women that couldn't. They were defenseless and young kids. So a coward move, but that's just what he would do. He abducted them away from a stamp kiosk in Novotakashikniks, which is the same city he killed one of his earlier victims in 82. And then while there, he was seen by several witnesses where he's able to give investigators, some description of the killer. However, the body was found days later, and then they found some saliva and semen on the victim's clothing. But here's the thing. You know what happened, though? It seems like one of the victims, not this boy, another victim that she killed in 84, he was they found type B blood, and they found some semen that kind of matched his, but the blood didn't match, which threw them off. So in other words, it's like if the cops find and the forensics team find some evidence, some of it matches, and also some witnesses actually did say that they see somebody similar to him, but they could confirm. But because the blood was different, that's a big evidence to suggest, oh, well, the blood doesn't match, so it can't be him. So they're right there, even though they probably knew in 84 he would commit some murders, they had to let him go. So he served he literally served a month. No, he served like 3 months, I believe, for and the reason they even brought him in there because some of the evidence, but because he had priors. Remember, he was a thief, he was still, hijacking cars, some small burglaries, mild burglary, petty burglary, petty theft, petty crime, but he was a thief like the previous killer. So that's what they brought him in the first place. Then he happens to match some of the stuff on a crime site, but not too much. So it wasn't enough substantial evidence, which I don't understand because, I mean, if you find semen and some kind of a piece of cloth, but the bloody match, they're like, there wasn't enough to really call them. So he was being watched. So this is like the first step to bring him to justice. So from 84, from December when he was released to August 85, he didn't commit no murders. See, he was smart. He would go on some sprees of murders, then you chill out and not kill nobody. But then you do murders again, like 5 months later, a year later. The urge never left him. His brain was always hungry for murder. And I guess his heart. I mean, he was just a very sick individual, to say the least. But sick is not the word, man. This guy was showed perversive tendencies and psychopathic killer who just liked to kill. He enjoyed killing as much as he enjoyed heavy sex, but torturing women with heavy sex. Now, it was never found that he molested any boys, but he definitely tortured and beat up and killed a lot of young boys. And I mean, apparently, in a couple of them, semen was found on some boys' bodies too. So I mean, he might have raped a couple boys, young boys, but it was never really described here in the information I gathered. But apparently, he had some kind of sexual, sick, perversive, I guess, act or fantasy which he acted on. I don't know, by whatever he thought it was, in his mind. He wasn't God. It was definitely the devil in his mind making him do that. But he was fucked up. Yeah. So as he gets out, right? Again, he has a job and he's working. He was doing like he was working as a clerk. He was working as a clerk at a store as well as doing some. He was actually apparently working at some kind of shop. I forgot. I think it was a car shop or something. He was fired from that job for being late and for not really complying. But it seemed like his life at that point had changed completely. He was all about murdering people and he's working just to kind of cover his identity. See, so as he went along, he got worse and worse, and the killings just kept going. You know what I mean? So, yeah. So, basically, yep. So he did this, and so the next murder was a girl named we'll call her Nikita Polovaka. We'll make up a name for her, but her name starts with an M, but it's not Nikita. He encountered an 18-year-old woman near the airport in Domodedovo in Russia, Soviet Union. Lured her into a thicket of woods where she was brutally stabbed 38 times in the neck, chest, and strangled to death. He also cracked somebody's neck like with a stone. This is an 18-year-old boy. Broke his neck, and as he broke his neck, he made a hole. And he freaking, oh man, I can't read that much more of this. I can't even say it, but he made a hole here. So he broke his neck, and with some kind of dagger, some kind of tool, cracked the hole. It was like a hook here. So he made a hole right in his like his what's it called? What's it called? The neck bone here. The bone that sticks out. He actually collarbone? No.
Collarbone? Is it like the neck?
Yeah, right here though. The back collarbone. Yep. So he broke his neck and then he's bleeding, and he left him. He also cracked his head, so he actually let him bleed to death. The guy was already dead, I guess, and he made a hole. So he very torturous. And again, he wasn't known to steal necessarily from his victims, although I think once or twice he did. But he would more like sometimes he'll take a piece of like mutilate the body, take a piece of flesh, and then he'll hide it somewhere. Definitely a mutilator, and again, which was the name by Ripper and the Butcher. Almost seems like he was inspired by what's like the butcher name? There was a butcher that used to be like a I can't remember his name, another killer, and also Jack the Ripper. So it's almost like he had a little tendencies from them. He might have been inspired by them, but there's no direct connection. But definitely a very sick guy. And some of the murders were done. It's funny how he was actually, or ironically, he was coincidentally very similar and at the very same time as Robert Hansen, but a little after. Like he was a little older than Hansen, but Hansen did his first murder in 60. He did his first murder in 78. And then, but his first assault, and he was, again, molestation, assault, and improper behavior with kids was going on as a school teacher in his school teacher days. I don't understand how he lasted so long, 72 to 81 as a teacher.
Yeah, he lasted a long time, man. How did he last 9 years? How did he last 9 years? You know what, man? Again, the justice system is to blame here because he was not kept in check at an early age. Like you said, the first 2 times he got involved with his pupils, nothing was done. It just he probably felt a little bit invincible.
Yeah. So about that, right? So he apparently he got away with a lot, and he was doing this on a regular. Now, just a little information for our people watching, whoever wants to know more about this psychotic motherfucker, psychological profile, right? About him. He was described in this guy named Burkanowski, which was like a person, like a psychologist. He was doing like the profile for describing the killer as a reclusive man between 45 and 50, who had endured painful and isolated childhood and who was incapable of flirting or courtship with women or approaching any kind of woman. But this individual is well educated, likely to be married, having children, also sadist to suffer from impotence and could not achieve arousal only by seeing his victims suffer. So it's almost like he wanted to be in his at his mercy, and he just enjoys seeing them. And sometimes some killers actually like to do that too, but they might let him get away, or some killers let him live. I mean, it's weird, bro. Some killers, as bad they actually, it's not that they have a heart or they're honorable. Some are some kind of way, which is a weird situation to begin with, because a serial killer really has no heart. But some, I guess, kind of have a little heart, I guess. Or some of them, it's like, it's not that they have a heart, but to them it's like a game. Like they'll see somebody torture, and they might fuck with him and hurt him, and then they'll just see him, they'll be like this, to do the final stab or the final blow, but they just let him die on their own. They don't do it, they walk away. Or they'll batter somebody, but not kill them at all. Just kind of like lead them that way. But they might take their tongue or take their eyes just to be fucked up, I guess, or not to be traced back. And some are so careless, they don't care. They'll batter somebody, almost kill them, let them live, knowing they'll live and probably go to the police, and they walk away. So you have careless serial killers, you have sadistic evil one. Andre's case, another guy we talked about, they're both definitely purist. I mean, killers. I mean, just, I don't know, bro. Pure evil, just sadistic, very eerie, very fucked up. I mean, yeah. Rapists, cowards. I mean, clearly we're preying on weaker people. I mean, luring them again. The art of deception of like creepy. Oh, come here, let me lure you. Like just like again, like a psychotic, like a killer. So I'm like, wow. And then reading about this guy, but I'm surprised he was not diagnosed. He might have been later on in his life, but he was definitely, he had been diagnosed as kind of like again an ability to really talk to any kind of woman, and so he suffered from it through his life, which kind of made him go that way, I guess. Transpired to something worse. See how the chain of events with both of these guys, the correlations are real.
Yeah. Well, what do you think? Yeah, no, definitely have a you can definitely see there's some correlation somewhere. What do you ultimately think led him to want to start murdering? What in his childhood do you think?
I think so he had been in the army, right? I'm not sure if he had been in any wars, but he had definitely been in the army, and he was also an expert with guns. I mean, you can say he was kind of like he was somewhat of not a jack of all trades, but he knew a couple things, a thing or two, almost like a handyman. Hold on, man. Hold on, somebody's calling me. What the fuck? Give me a second. Never mind. It's all good. Yeah, it's all good. A friend of ours is calling. I'll tell you later. But let me see. Hold on. All right, let's see. There we go. All right.
Well, call in if they have some comments. They can call in.
Yeah, they can call in on this podcast, but they should be watching it, Nah, they're not calling for a podcast. I mean, they're probably watching it, but it's not because like the talk show they're calling in. It's not that they're calling because he will see what I'm doing and probably hang out later. But I mean, right now we're in a different time zone, man. I'm focused on something else right now. So so ultimately what led him to that, man, it's just that just almost like just the way he was raised. I mean, he was raised in poverty. He only had a sister, didn't have no brothers, never really had like any kind of friends. His child was really kind of fucked up and awkward. And throughout his career, it seemed like the jobs he had, he was I mean, it's almost like as a teacher, he was like mentally, verbally abused as a teenager, as a teen. He never really could kind of get a girl to talk to him. And, even like in his case, also like some girls like definitely like left him off, like laughed, like laughed at him, and kind of, were interested or kind of played him off. So it's just like that all resentment and the feeling of like being worthless or being like shamed. And he even wanted to kill himself because he didn't want his parents to bear the shame. Also, his father had been in the army too. So the whole, it's not like he came from an abusive childhood or nothing like that, but it did seem like his parents didn't really show him a lot of affection, it seemed like just enough. But his father is believed that he might have been the birth of a rape situation, like his mother might have been raped by German soldiers in Ukraine, because a lot of them were doing it back in those years, and they took over Ukraine. In Russia, it's a little different, more deep in Russia, but then there was never no proof. So it was like, it's believed that his father was his father. Chikatilo's father, indeed was his father, who he believes he was his father, but there's a small situation where he might have been the victim of a rape, and his sister might have been actually, his stepsister, whatever. So that's just, which is pretty, again, ironically, if he's the victim of rape, but he was born that way, so obviously it was different. And then growing up awkward, just that. I mean, and then he becomes a rapist. But again, it's just the inactivity to talk to women and desperation, I think, and just the fact that he was already a little, not all there. He grew up in solitude a little, didn't really have a lot of a relationship with his sister, although she lived him a little bit. But she kind of moved on with her own life, got married, moved on with in-laws. He was solitary. But again, he was married, though. I mean, he was with the help of his family a little. He apparently somehow was married and had a wife. But ultimately, his marriage also was doomed and eventually failed. And his wife didn't know about his stuff, but I think she ended up divorcing him shortly after the son was born in 1969. So I think around like 72, 73. And in 73, he was accused of his first really sexual assault. So it kind of makes sense chronologically. That's when it seemed like he was already like single. Although he started his crimes when he was married, but then apparently his marriage also dissolved, and his life went to shit. Apparently, he also getting fired from jobs for not being professional, for being a little bit incompetent. Which he seemed like he was intelligent, but he wasn't the best worker. And again, as a teacher, he was a disaster, and he was also very much a failure. And eventually, he was molesting students, which is what led him. But that's another thing, because he was also killing young boys. So it seemed like he kind of like a revenge little factor, and he had to get what he wanted to get. So he wanted to rape and torture and be sadistic to women and get his arousal. He would kill them and strangle them and do some gruesome things, and he mutilate little boys and young men. But he didn't kill no boys over 25. Only one particular murder, and he doesn't really explain why he did it. He just kind of did it. He seemed like he preferred young boys and kids in high school. So it kind of lets us see that he might have been really made fun of, which he was in high school and in middle school, by students. No one really liked him. He wasn't a very popular teacher. Let's put it that way. So that's another.
Yeah, exactly. I also think him being inadequate sexually was like definitely a frustration for him. Yeah.
So also one more thing that's worth talking about. So because many killings happen on weekdays near mass transportation hubs and across the entire, basically Rostov Oblast and city and the river. Also, the killer required to travel regularly, and basically, he based it on a certain time of the week to do the killings. So he probably had a production schedule. This is like what the profile was actually linked to. Also, when when this happened, when they found some evidence on him, they did an index card on him. So he was basically put on an index. It's something basically, it's like an index of like, it's like how we do cold cases here in America, where they might put an individual's name, they might be linked to a case. There's no evidence to really hold him, but strong enough evidence to link his name, because his semen was found in the 84 case when he was arrested. They were able to, kind of like link him to to more murders, and to kind of like when the case got reopened, and he was actually, because the bodies were flying again, like in 85 he committed like almost 10 murders. So totally there was 52 murders thought of, known. But there could have been more. They actually were never discovered to this point. And it's been, 1990 was what, 31 years ago? 29 years ago, actually. It's when, he got caught up, went to jail, and did some time. And then eventually 2 years later, he was executed. So 29 years ago, he had done approximately 52 murders between 78 and 90, right? 90 was his last murder, apparently, because after like around 91, it's like when he was like arrested and all that. And, that's when the spree kind of ended, which means that might be more murders. But he had also, with thumbnails, once he was murdered, they were like kind of pinpointing, the different parts of the place. And all the murders did happen within a closed area, although he had a murder in Moscow. But Rostov is not too far from Moscow, apparently. I mean, it's not like super far, although Russia's pretty big, though. So a lot of murders happen in rural areas. Even though he was in the city, he would lure them in or places in the city, but kind of hidden places within the city. So equivalent to like a rapist killer in Philly, killing people by the train tracks, by the Island Transportation Center, by those woods I told you about, those demonic woods, down by like the projects all the way down out there by southwest Philly. I just went to a spot recently with my boys at No Tunnel, And during the day, it's really cool to explore. Actually, it's a historical Philly site, so it's actually not like a scary site. But at night, it could be a little, I don't know, like, you might not want to go there at night unless you're like with a lot of friends and a big flashlight. So he would lure them and he would drag them to places like that. And again, he would do a typical serial killer murder thing where he would kind of bring them out and just, take them out to the comfort zone in deep waters. Pun intended, no pun intended, but that's what he would do. And he'll be women, so snuffling them, doing all this and, trying to, they'll try to scream, do like a muffled scream, but he would choke them, strangle them, stab them, or trying to kill them. So you would lure them out there, and a lot of times you would want to hurt them, and because that's the only way you would kind of like have an erection. So very sick man, very sick man.
Definitely, man. It's like crimes, just the way he killed people, and just the way he, I would say he tortured and killed people, men and women, just very, very gruesome. He gouged their eyes out for a lot of them as well.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. That's why he's called the Butcher of Rostov, and that's why he has so many murders too. It just makes him disgusting. Yeah. Ultimately, what led to his downfall?
I'm going to get to that in a second. I'm going to just cover 2 more murders, and then we can start talking about the downfall. And it's basically the downfall, and then we can kind of like wrap it up after that because it's pretty much I covered a lot of them. So he killed a girl named I'll call her Ivana Pogradites. It sounds like a Croatian list, but it's Russian. Her body be split open from neck to genitalia. Jesus Christ. She suffered a broken jaw. Seemed like he had cut up her face a little bit. She actually apparently lost a tooth. And apparently he'd also smash people. Sometimes you'll kill them, you'll smash their face on the ground, or even remove breast or cut them up. So torture women, also boys, because apparently he removed a boy's penis. But in this case, removed the eye out, and removed the breast. So as a murderer, it made series of efforts to try to fight. So they investigated this, and they thought they explained the sudden death and the murder. They found exactly why she died. So it's like the investigators getting a little better. And by 86, they found out that like the trademark was the mutilation and taking of the eyes. So between 85 and 86, he had killed at least approximately, just in that year and a half, 2-year period, close to 9 people. But again, some of the dates, some of the dates are approximate. So don't quote me. They might be a little wrong, but just by a little bit, not by like a lot, because this is the information, and all the info kind of matches. So I fact checked all the info that I have. In 87, he killed 3 times, including a 12-year-old boy named Oleg Markonov at a train station, again, near the Urals. This was actually a little farther than Rostov. So yeah, apparently most of the murders were like, not all of them, because 52 murders is a lot of murders, number one. Number two, a lot of them were in the vicinity of each other, but some were like in Leningrad, some were in the Ukrainian city of Zaporizhia, and in Moscow, Russia. So yeah, to my Russian friends, I got to get my geography a little better with my Russian geography, because I used to be pretty good with geography. And Russia's got a lot of cities, so I should know some of these cities' names. Plus, my great grandfather actually went to Stalingrad, so he actually studied in Stalingrad, and he was there before World War I. Right after World War I, so before World II. So a little history for you there, bro. Some of my folks went to Stalingrad. Yeah, bro. So basically, to make a long story short, he continued his so definitive resurfacing. So basically, the murders were resurfacing, and some of the initial murders he committed earlier in his career, like in the late 70s and 80s, like between 78, 79 to like 81, after losing a job as a teacher and after jumping from a job, it's almost like he had a thing at night doing at night. That was his thrill. But the murders resurfaced, and because he already had priors, he was already questioned to the cesspool of the murders, and they're trying to get some information on him, and that's how they kind of tied him eventually. Some evidence. That's how they kind of got him, bro. The evidence was it was basically in 1990. He killed another woman, immediately 22-year-old woman, and the arrest happened because of a mistake. So he was arrested like in 84, and he claimed it was a mistake, but it was a real arrest. He said I was like, oh, I'd been committed, I've been accused of the same thing, but I'm innocent. But it was a little different. A strip search was done, and it revealed part of pieces of evidence. Again, the fingertip and some he had left apparently some scars on his body. The medical examiners concluded that the wound was from a human bite, and he might have been from a murderer named Victor who had killed. Was actually a pretty physically strong youth who he thought, and apparently he killed him. But scratches and bites. The bites of the finger and a small piece of bone that was missing, or not missing, but it's broken. That's what was actually found. So, and the fingernail had been bitten off too. And that Chikatilo never sought to do medical treatment for it. So had he done treatment, not been there. So he was a sloppy killer, but if he's struggling with them, he had scars on his body, and he actually done some, I guess I mean, he might have still been there, a scar, but he actually might have been able to kind of get away with it furthermore and hide him more. And he took his treatment, but he took his treatment. So, that's how they kind of found him. And eventually, they did some more, investigation on him. So it's revealed that he had, some knives were found that apparently matched, and a blood was taken, right? Blood was taken. He was placed in a cell and with the police informer, and he also engaged in conversation to elicit him to do more information. But, not a lot was found. On November 21st of the year of 1990, formal questioning began. And it was, so interrogation was done by a guy named Isa Kostyov. And basically, what happened is they believed that he was a very sick individual and needed help. After Chuck talked to him, because he was talking about what he had done, but, there was like a show that, he was kind of like a little bit of a sadist, and he was a little more than that. Yeah, so the intention was to basically so he could confess, so he would not be prosecuted over a reason of insanity. And they knew the case was kind of circumstantial against them. The police knew that, and under Soviet law, they had 10 days until they could legally hold the suspect before changing, charging or releasing them. You know what I mean? So that's how it kind of happened. But he denied a lot of the murders, bro. Although he did confess to molesting a lot of students, pupils as a teacher, right? That's kind of like it started with him, like the downfall. So he's at this point, he's not saying that he did the murders, but he's saying that, like, he molested, and the molestations and the murders, there's some correlation because apparently he was pretty brutal, molesting a lot of the people he did. Now he didn't kill all of the guys he molested, or girls, but he definitely, was pretty much a serial molester before he ever was a killer. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so,
definitely.
The confession on November 29th, the request of a couple of people there, like, were like the confession people, and psychological evaluation done by a professor. He confessed that he was indeed guilty of crimes which had been arrested. He actually burst in tears after. Yep, he was actually questioning of suspect. So they did like a psychological evaluation, almost like not a lie detector test, but like the kind of psychological. They keep asking questions, but the way it was, like, they can say words and maybe like it can resonate. So he actually, apparently, his conscience did actually lead him to confess, and he actually confessed for a lot of the murders, and also was proven. And that's how basically he was confessed. He was taken to jail, but that's what he still confessed to everything. So there's so many more murders, but eventually confessed to 34. And initially, 1991, he was only 34 murders, but apparently, eventually, 52. So 52 times minus 34, we're talking about close to 18 left that they didn't know about, but they were discovering. You know what I mean? As time went on, because some murders were found later too. Man. It's disgusting how the bodies, like you said, had been mutilated and they already had decomposed. It began to run, so it was hard to really, you know what I mean, to really like get all the stuff of evidence. And I mean, evidence was left, but again, he was left out of jail in '84, so years had passed. Had to kind of found more information on him.
Yeah, he pleaded mental insanity too. When he got to court, he tried to get a mental insanity plea, and they did not grant it.
Yeah,
and he actually flipped out in the courtroom. There's actually a video on YouTube, you can watch it.
I gotta watch it.
Yeah, he flipped out in the courtroom because he thought he was going to get a mental insanity plea. He started acting mental, like just looking around the room and like doing all these crazy things. He thought he was going to get a mental insanity plea, and they didn't grant it to him. And then I'll let you elaborate. How was he executed?
So before we get to that, right? Basically, he was also convicted in '92. He was executed in a really brutal way, bro. And saying it or not, the Russian government wasn't buying it for real. They were like he actually wrote a letter to Boris Yeltsin, who at the time was the Russian president in the 80s and 90s. So those that know politics and all that, he was denied. His final appeal was rejected. He had a couple appeals to his case. To I think he was playing for insanity. So he wanted from what I know, he would have settled with like life imprisonment or possibly in an institution. So he might have been there, which is not really a prison, but in Russia it might have been different in those years in the Soviet Union. So he was rejected. He did a year in '93. Again, he was delayed because hang on a second. In '93, that's when he was delayed. He could have been sentenced a lot before, which was in '94. But in '93, there was there were chances that he was, he wasn't fit to be evaluated. You know what I mean? And he had to, he had to be checked a little. Like he was taken to courtroom cell and basically awaiting execution. But he did lodge an appeal against the conviction in Russia. But this was rejected. Yeah, it's 1993. So '94 is when they killed him, and they shot him in a year. He was shot in 1 year. He died from one single bullet to the left ear. Boom, bang, one time. They shot him. Yep. So I guess they put like a mask on you, they tie you up somewhere, and they just shoot you. Almost like a firing squad, except it wasn't really firing squad, it was one bullet. Russia was a lot more brutal, man. Wait, what?
Yeah, they said it was one shot behind the ear.
Yeah, in Russia they weren't killing like in here they'll tie you up. You know what we hear in America, bro? There's 10 blanks and only one is actually the fatal shooting, or maybe two, but a lot of them are blanks, and no one actually knows. This is the type of shooter like this. Police will shoot you like it's like the firing squad, the sharpshooters. Yeah. But in Russia they will tie you up and put you in a chair, and one time they'll shoot you like from behind or in the ear, or they can shoot you in the heart. In Albania, back in the day, they'll put your face in a mask, put you against the wall, and shoot you with a rifle, bang bang twice. Yeah, you can actually. Sometimes they would choose the method for you. Sometimes you could choose your own, but it depends. It's communist days, bro. You aren't really, honestly, you're not getting much of a choice. I mean, especially if you're a criminal like him. He was a serial murderer. He did some gruesome murders. I didn't even mention some stuff he did. So violent.
And there was the difference between him and Hansen. See, Hansen got 465 years in prison. He didn't actually get sentenced to execution or death. He wasn't given the death penalty, whereas Chikatilo was. Chikatilo was granted the death penalty. And pretty much when he flipped out in court, they took that was when they were taking him down the hall to have him executed.
Yeah, in 1992, bro, there's a picture of him in 1992, dude, and you can probably see it if you go to like Wikipedia or search on like some of those sites that talk about serial killers. It's like those investigative reports. There's a picture of him in 1992 where he's like this against the ceiling. He's like, he looks like, he looks like as evil Aleister Crowley or like Charles Manson. One difference is he wasn't some occult. He was just like a serial killer. He was just taking human life. He was a bloodthirsty, he just wanted human flesh. That's all he wanted. He just wanted to kill flesh. And he would carve and stab and mutilate and just the unspeakable, despicable things he was doing.
Yeah. Was he a cannibal?
No, he wasn't a cannibal, but he would take parts of the body. He would cut fingers and faces and like genitalia. Definitely with women, he did some very questionable things and some very gruesome things there. Like I said, you gotta be very careful how you even word it, but it is what it is. This show is not for the weak-hearted, so especially not this episode today. Today we even had a disclaimer, so we're good. But definitely like a pervert and a pervert killer who I guess you do what he would do, and after that you just he had like a fantasy and like a fixation of like killing the body and like carving up the body, mutilating the body. Like some of these victims, the bodies are found to be more in kind of like better shape. It's not actually even more like the way he did it. Like they were just found to have some semen or he ejaculated or something nasty like that. But he definitely tortured a lot of them. Some of them are like really carved up, don't like mutilated. So mutilation had to be the norm. It seemed like from 84 or 85 to about 1988, he was doing like a lot of mutilation. He also killed like four or five young boys in 88, ages 9 to 14. Yep, a lot in 88 he killed a lot of young boys. A lot of and also killed a 20-year-old Russian girl named Zarina. The name I changed the name, but it was with a Z. But I just don't want to say Zarina. He killed her and he strangled her. He strangled her with his hands, and he put apparently. He kind of had her something. All right, think of this picture real quick. Like somebody has your back almost like a circle. He had her like this, and he had a knife like this. And he's like, "Don't scream! I'll slice you." And then he's grabbing her face. So the whole time he's like, getting all ready where like trying to touch her, and kissing her and all that. And he took her down. He started raping her, and as he did, he stabbed her to death. And he also choked her. So he might have stabbed her and choked her, but he got really, very nasty with that one. And He
thought he was going to get an insanity sentence, man. He wasn't getting that in court.
I think he was full of shit. I just think he did all that so he thought he'd get away easy.
He was, man. He was just trying to get an insanity sentence so they didn't kill him.
If he really was insane, he would have been right. He was just a jerk off, fucking killer, psychotic motherfucker. Because if he really was insane, you can't be insane and use all the techniques. He was using his smarts to learn. He was like too smart to how he was killing him, but then he's trying to play safe. Nah, be honest. Tell me what you did. You did what you did. You're just a killer. If you're sick in the mind, you're sick. But insanity is one thing, and being heavy with thirst to kill. He was bloodthirsty, bro. He wanted to drink blood. That's what he wanted. He wanted blood and flesh. He wasn't a cannibal. He wasn't drinking blood literally. For those that might have not caught what I just said, but he was, he just wanted like human blood. He was just, he was psychotic. He might have been almost like not a cannibal, but some people are not cannibals, but they like to kill the body, like kill. They're like killing cannibals. They'll kill you, but actually won't eat you, though. You know what I mean? There's a name for it. I can't think of.
Oh yeah,
like a butcher, again, more like a performing cannibal. You might slice the body, kill the person, even torture them, but you're not going to actually eat the body. You might take a piece of the body. So a mutilator, a mutilator, like a torturer. So again, very, very similar.
Yeah. Before we head off of this, man, I'll actually, if you don't mind, I'll share a 2-minute video on him in court if you guys want to see it.
Go ahead, you can share it.
To show what he looks like.
What
he looked like in court when he tried to act crazy. Here, let me share my.
Change
My audio. Can you see it okay? Is it like
The Butcher of Rostov.
look how crazy he looks, bro?
On the morning of April 14th, 1992, in the Russian city of Rostov-on-Don,
I'm just gonna fast
citizens
forward
who
it
loved the
a little bit.
success of their headlines had branded him, though was dressed in a souvenir Olympic sports shirt provided by the court. His head had been shaved, a
Yeah, look at him,
standard
bro.
procedure to guard against lice. As proceedings
Yeah, I
began,
see some videos. See, he looks like an animal. He wasn't all the animal, but still, not easy way. He was just get to be killed. Simple as that.
iron cage
Trying to
in the courtroom. The cage was to protect him from the rage of the parents of the victims.
He was never able to
Like the
sit at a
parents.
table and converse with his lawyer the way a Western defendant would have been. It was
Look at him, bro. He's so. Oh God.
Yes.
proceeding. You had a number
Oh
of
my
family
God.
members of victims who
You see how he looks, bro? He looks like a clown. He looks like he could play
received
a killer in a show.
if they had had the option
Yeah, he
of
does.
seeing him executed by having wolves tear him apart, they would have voted for that.
The defendant was allowed an opportunity to address the court. Families of Chikatilo's victims screamed insults. Some fainted. In a rambling 2-hour statement, Chikatilo described himself as a man robbed of his genitals. Born impotent, Chikatilo claimed to be cursed by a lifetime of sexual frustration that had eventually driven him to murder.
What are you talking about? This is the picture.
He
Right there.
asserted he never planned to kill,
Ugh.
but that he was seized with shaking and shivering and had lost control.
He seemed at various times intent on proving that he was crazy. At some points that I witnessed, he jumped up and started shouting at the judge and then dropped his pants and exposed himself.
Yeah, look at this dude.
At other times,
Look at this,
he
George.
started cursing and screaming.
Yeah, I don't see that. But that's crazy. She shows his
Believed
he's trying to genitalia. He's a sick fuck, bro. Look at his face.
an
Yeah.
effort to gain sympathy.
Yeah, so ultimately, let me unshare this. Yeah, so he basically tried to incite craziness, but that just didn't work.
Yeah.
So that was ultimately what happened.
Yeah, bro. Man.
Yeah, man.
I mean,
So
it's very fortunate that you have to go down the way for some of these guys to become so crazy, but you have to realize that it's just going to be like the way they were up. They have to have some kind of something. One dude's a hunter. He had been in the army. He was just, a little bit manipulator. Very, like, you see how he looked. You can tell you look like an awkward person to begin with, like a creepo. He's the definition of a creepo. So I mean, I'm not surprised. I mean that he went like that. But the murders are gruesome. And in Russia in those years, I mean, geez, how did they get him in the 80s? Did you see that? Like they have to pull him in a cage in the freaking court because the press probably killed him. I mean.
yeah, they had to put him in a lion's cage to literally save him because they were gonna freaking murder him. They're gonna fucking murder him, dude.
Sometimes if it's like they're fucked up, you could even have the parents in a court or some of the people. I mean, it was like the soldiers to be there, the people in the police. It was like the guy dude back in the day that killed his kids in school in Ohio. And he was left in a cage and he was all fucked up. And then the parents were talking. You know what? You took our son from us, and then the one dude, he's like laughing and he talked. He's like, I don't give a fuck. And he's like, fuck all that. And remember, it was in Ohio. It was like a young dude. He shot some dudes in school. We actually looked out for him and he killed them. One of those guys in school. It was crazy. I remember. It's a serial killer smiles in court. You can actually probably watch it on YouTube, but it reminds me of that. Like a lot of serial killers or fucked up individuals have actually taunted, mocked, or left in court about what they did or to the victims' families and shit. It's happened before, bro. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yes, sir. All right, man. Is there anything else you want to put at the end of that, man? So that was kind of Andre Chikatilo. We've been going on, man. It's crazy. 2 hours.
Yeah.
I knew this one was going to take a while, though.
Well, this is like this one. I mean, we'll go back to like 50 minutes, an hour the most. I mean, today was just a little because there was a lot of information. So, to be fair, both of us had a long, a long cover up on both of these sick fucks. But
exactly.
No,
next time we'll have to cover.
Say it again.
I said next time we'll have to cover just one person because it's a lot,
Yeah, maybe we can cover one, but we can do another one and all that. But
yeah,
no, man. I got nothing else to say. I mean, just wow. I was really intrigued and shocked about some of the stuff that I researched and learned. But hey, it is what it is. But when good comes bad and bad comes good, I mean, it's a great world we live in, but it's a lot of fuck shit like that. So it's better, to just some of the historic infamous serial killers, but you don't got to be into it or even know much about it, but just kind of have an idea a little bit of some of the cool stuff. But it's better to kind of like, leave that stuff alone, so to speak, and, not read too much, because you really have to have the heart for it, man. Some of the stuff is gruesome, and it's just so much negativity, so much death, you're like, oh. But I'm glad the guy what he deserved, I mean, the one dude died, Chikatilo, and then the other guy died in jail, right?
Yeah, he died of like heart. He had some type of complications, but health complications. But yeah, Chikatilo was sentenced to death. So that's what the stories of Robert Hansen and Chikatilo, man. I'm sure you learned a lot from researching them. You have anything else to add tonight, man, or do you want to just put the closing comments on this one?
Yeah, just put the closing comments. I don't have nothing to really say. Just like you said, bro, a lot of behind the scenes work, guys. We're working. Trust me, Steve and I are working diligently, and at a fast pace to try to bring some better content, some better stuff. I mean, obviously today we have a little better or different platform we're using. So
format, yeah,
we're definitely growing our channel. Today should be a good. I mean, mine feels a little longer than expected, but it was a lot of facts. We're gonna have a lot of hopefully a lot of viewers, and things are gonna change a little, for the best. Things have been a little bit up and down with us. We're going a little well. A slight decline, maybe one episode, but things kind of start going up again, and here we are today. I mean, definitely analytics look to be good again. Getting there, we definitely had a decent reach, and we'll explore a little more with this particular formula. But today was a decent episode. The topic was a little out there, a little crazier than usual. I mean, definitely a very interesting retrospect and infamous topic, so to speak, about two really infamous individuals, killers. But a lot of people like the stuff, a lot of people don't. It is what it is. But yeah, I thought it was a pretty good episode. I mean, I like the information. You had some good info on Robert Hansen as well, and I had some good stuff. But we hope you guys were entertained, and we kept you guys intrigued with some. It's like watching a scary movie or documentary, except you have two guys breaking down some facts. You know what I mean? So we hope that you guys were enjoyed the night and were entertained.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, we'll do some more true crime ones as we go. It can be serial killers, but we can cover one. It doesn't have to be two, or we can do some other things. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we got some stuff.
Yeah. What was that show called, man? Ah, fuck. Yeah, I can't remember now, man. I knew it. The tunnel that I was at, bro, and the one I told you. So the one I told you about, I just mentioned the show earlier, as well as the one I told you about. There's two tunnels. One is 30 feet underground and is downtown area. There were, I think it's what the fuck was it? Was it 80s? It wasn't Cocaine Cowboys. It was the Philly documentary just came out. What the fuck is it called? Somebody help me.
Yeah, I forget.
Cocaine. Not Brick City, it was Cocaine City or something. Something about Philly in the 80s, bro. But it was like a nice documentary, and they're filmed. A lot of them were filmed in Southwest Philly, West Philly, and even by the Plateau. They filmed a lot of different ones. It was it's on Netflix. That's all I know. But it's a documentary that's set in Philly. It's I forgot what it's called, but it's a pretty good one though. It's about like the Philly tunnels and underground scene and what happened here back in the day. And actually, we're one of the oldest cities, bro. So it's a lot of things going on in Philly. We talk about urban legends and shit happened in the 80s here, who used to run the city. You'd be surprised who used to run the city of Philly in the 70s and 80s. Like, you'd be surprised who actually and power. From the mafia to JBM to other mobsters to congressmen to crooked politicians, ruthless leaders. Oh, man, so much in the city's history that we don't know about.
Yeah, definitely, bro.
So, but yeah, man, I'm pretty much good to go. If you want to say anything else before we call any closing statements, shout out, and the usual promotions, or
just want to give a thank you to anybody that's out there watching. I'm seeing that we had some viewers tonight on Facebook, both on our podcast pages. Saw a couple on YouTube. Saw some comments on YouTube as well that I responded to. So good stuff tonight. Honestly, just covered two solid serial killers. Well, two interesting. I don't want to say solid, but two notorious serial killers, two prolific ones. This was a little bit of a shake-up for us, and this was a different format that we just started kind of experimenting with today here. If you guys like us using StreamYard instead of Zoom, let us know. This is something that we're trying to experiment with. And I think that it's a little bit more creative on here. We can do more things, which is really, really cool. This is only a couple features of what we can do. So I'm starting to like this a little bit more. But guys, yeah, definitely. But guys, thank you for tuning in as always. If you have any comments and you're watching this afterwards, I know some people personally that said they're probably going to watch this a little later on. So if you're watching this, or even if you don't watch to the end, if you watch majority of it, drop some comments down below if you see something you like. As I said, hit that like button because it helps us out on our side. Turn that notification bell on YouTube, and yeah. just keep watching our stuff. We got some good stuff coming, and we got some guests coming back on a couple few
guest season stuff. Right, starting soon. Next week, I mean, we possibly might have a guest next week. I'm not sure yet, but definitely if not this week, one after that, we'll have a guest. So it'll be it should be cool, good to go. I mean, then again, people on this, it might be better guest here because I mean, there's so much we could do here, but the guest got to obviously be a little familiar with this, which is very easy. I mean, it took us 3 minutes to sign up and to set it up. I mean, as far as the account, so
yeah, it's real easy. It's not hard at all. So you'll be good there. I don't really have anything else. I just want to wish everybody a great night, have a great weekend, and we'll continue to keep coming at you guys with content as best as we can. So
some data, some content. Definitely next episode might be another really interesting one, so we can continue with some really cool episodes that we probably haven't touched yet. So, but remember, guys, always subscribe, like, share, comment, and all that. We appreciate you guys watching in and looking in, and also definitely send us some DMs and emails and let us know that what you guys think and if you liked it, something could be better. If you have an idea, or even it doesn't have to be a topic, but something small we can talk about, like within the topic, because we do mention a few other things at times, So, it was a pretty interesting one today, man. The first one about serial killers, spooky stories, gruesome stuff. But hopefully, you guys will, enjoy the show and entertained. And that'll be all. Until the next one. Until the next time, It was a pleasure talking to you, bro, and definitely good work, man. I mean, definitely very good insights. Elaborate stuff. So,
same with you. Same with you, man. It was fun, dude.
Yeah, different but fun.
Yeah, I'm gonna end it here if that's cool with you, man. And have a great night, bro. Have a great night to everyone else out there. And as always, here at the Locked In Podcast, be true and be you. And we'll see you next time.
Have a good night, guys. Have a great one. Talk to you later, bro. Be cool, guys. Peace.